Hi guys, this is Hirosaki. This story is all about what if Naruto will either be the strongest shinobi or die trying. On that day years ago, they put their faith in him. Naruto made a promise that he would be the best ninja he could be. Either all alone, or together with friends, he was going to make his family proud. Whether the ninja underworld wanted him to or not, he'd either die trying, or become the strongest shinobi in history. Find out here. Welcome aboard. Chapter 3, Dancing with Masters. Disclaimer, I do not own Naruto or history's strongest disciple Kenichi. Get your accusational finger out of my face. I never said it. I never said it at all. Libel and slander depending on whether you wrote it or said it. Flashback, 4 years ago, outside of Ryuzanpaku, after finding out that they were in Japan, 12-year-old Naruto and Shikamaru started gathering information on that one word that the ninja had told them to look into before shoving them off the boat and making them swim to shore. It took all of 6 hours, mostly to find the nearest library with open computers, and they found that Ryuzanpaku was a place in the town that had been Naruto's, very close to what had been his parents' home back before he had gone to Homeland Island to train. They had left much behind for him. Just as a thing, he looked around for a bank at Shikamaru's behest, just in case, and found that they had left him a decent amount of money to grow up with and the house that they owned. That had been the place where he and Shikamaru had stayed while preparing to break into Ryuzanpaku so that they could steal a significant stash of the greatest weapons in the world. He felt great about it. Like it was a sign that his parents were watching over him and knew that he would rock that mission and begin his career with a bang. Both Naruto and Shikamaru stood in front of the towering front gate that marked the exterior of the strongest fighters in the entire world. Masters of their martial arts. The huge sign out front that said Ryuzanpaku Dojo was no false advertising. It was sunset, and Shikamaru had come up with the time of approach for the mission. They did it during sunset instead of at night so that the sun would be at their backs from their point of infiltration. This would allow them the light to easily match what they picked up from Google Maps on the layout of the facility to what they saw on the ground. Shikamaru was smart. It was all his idea, and here Naruto thought that Shikamaru had always sucked at their culture classes where they learned about things like the internet. But he was rock solid. He'd done his homework. He'd found out everything that he could and made plan after plan, some that Naruto understood the basis of, many more that he did not. He didn't know that the boy had it in him. In the classes on the island, he never showed any of that at all. There was obviously a reason he was out there with him though, even if he was so horribly pessimistic. And now they had to go out and get the job done. You ready? Naruto asked, fingers twitching nervously. This was it. His first mission, in and out. Find those swords and get the hell out of here. Yeah. Shikamaru replied. He'd had an uneasy feeling about this whole thing since the second they made it to shore, and the more he learned the deeper his heart sank into his stomach. They weren't supposed to be able to pull this off. There are masterclass fighters in their Naruto. Guys stronger than Jounin. We're not fighting them, we're sneaking past them. Naruto said, beginning to move with Shikamaru to the appropriate side of the walls so that they could begin getting in. Yeah, it'll be hard, but it's nothing we can't do. They took us out and gave us this mission for a reason, Shika. Have some faith. Shikamaru buttoned his lip and nodded, willing to try and go through with the mission. But he wished he had as much confidence as Naruto, who was the first to poke his head over the wall to get a peek at the grounds. 3 buildings, all in a traditional Japanese style, just like the satellite shot said. One long 1-story building, and 2 other 2-story dwellings. The land was fairly pretty, and by the inside walls there were plenty of shrubs and trees for he and Shikamaru to use for hiding places. I'm going first. Wait a second after I do. Naruto said, climbing the rest of the way over and landing on the other side, concealed from view by the shrubs. Waiting a moment to make sure there was no motion, Naruto then reached his hand up and gestured for Shikamaru, who had been peeking over too, to come on down. He started to bend his knees for the drop-off of the 15-foot wall to Naruto's similar spot when right as he did so and landed behind the shrubs the doors to one of the dwellings opened up and out came a girl that looked about their age. Blonde and blue-eyed, she wore a white dogi and a purple leotard underneath it. Ha! 12-year-old Mio knew that she had seen something the second she'd gone outside to take a break from training with her grandfather. She saw it land behind the shrubs, but she couldn't tell what it had been. It was so quick. What was that? Behind the shrubs, Naruto and Shikamaru both had matching expressions of horror on their faces. How could they botch it that early and let a girl their age see them? There had to be something they could do to salvage it. Luckily, Naruto had an idea, touching his index and middle fingers to his throat in a specific spot. Naruto opened his mouth and let out the most picture-perfect rendition of a cat's meow that Shikamaru had ever heard from a human. Brilliant, right? It backfired. Wah! There's a kitty here? No, no, no. God damn it, Naruto. Thinking quickly again, Naruto did the exact same thing, only when he opened his mouth he threw his voice all the way across the yard to the wall on another side away from them, sending Mio scrambling to follow the shy cat that had fallen into her yard. Once she was gone, Shikamaru craned his head over in Naruto's direction in slow motion. Oh my god, that actually worked? You can make perfect cat noises and throw your voice? In his head he was screaming about how he couldn't believe that had worked. Naruto proudly nodded, I can do more than just cats. Remember that throat injury I got before well you were there? Shikamaru nodded, and as both cringed, Naruto realized that he didn't have to go into any more detail. Well, it made my voice sound like this and I can mess with it. As had been alluded to, Naruto had been very good in the culture classes, been practicing a lot while we were coming to this town. Hurts though. A roll of his eyes aside, Naruto and Shikamaru wasted not another second before dashing from behind cover to the nearest building, which happened to be the long one that looked like a dojo. What better place to keep swords than in the first place? You'd probably try to use one for practice. Both boys slid underneath the outside floor and crawled underneath the inside, peeking through tatami mats until they figured that they were inside. Once again, ever the diligent point man, Naruto went first again. From what Shikamaru could see from the few steps that Naruto took after getting out, he opened some doors to probably look for where the swords were. He then heard the sound of another door opening on the opposite end of the dojo. Then the sound of a sword's hilt clicking free of its sheath, then a cut, then the sound of a body hitting the floor. A boy. A rather dull female voice said in a specifically slow manner, where did he come from? The blade of a sword then slid itself neatly through a tatami mat right in front of Shikamaru's face. Ha! Well, abort mission, if they were even going to get the choice. Troublesome. Chapter 3, Dancing with Masters. Contrary to what Kenichi thought, when he'd won the fight against Daimonji but had still had to leave the karate club, it had not been the end of it. Because the thing about being perceived as being good at something was that other people had a tendency to try and see if there was really anything special about you. Kenichi's problems didn't stop there. While he wasn't outright bullied after winning some measure of respect, it also attracted a new shark, so to speak. Thanks to information from that slimy Naijima, they found out that the captain of the club that had refereed the fight now wanted to see if Kenichi's win had been a fluke. What the hell? He wasn't even in karate club anymore. He'd switched out to the gardening club just to avoid these situations now. In an effort to be proactive and head his troubles off at the pass, Kenichi had confronted Mio and asked her how she'd gotten so strong and what he had to do to reach the same level. In fact, I do know one way to become stronger over a short period of time. If you go to this place and learn martial arts quickly enough, you can become strong. But, the chances of you surviving are unlikely. Naruto stiffened up like a board when she'd said that to him, and when she explained that he just had to go there on his day off to see for himself. She drew him a map, but, if you get lost or don't know where it is, just call Naruto-kun. He can find it. And as Sunday rolled around, once again, Naruto sucked it up and got his friends back, because that was what friends did, and what he knew Kenichi would do for him if he ever became useful enough for such a thing to actually matter. If only. Dressed in the day-off attire of a blue zipped-up hoodie and orange cargo pants, Naruto knocked on Kenichi's front door and slapped himself. What's wrong with you? Get out now. You don't have to go there. But on the other hand. No, stop being a coward. It'll be fine. You're going there to back up your friend. I can't tell him not to train there just because of my gore. A short time later, the door opened to reveal a casually dressed cute preteen girl with messy brown hair almost like Kenichi's and purple eyes looking up at Naruto, who grinned back down at her in return. Hey there. Is your brother ready to go? The girl didn't let him in or move out of the way of the door, apparently not willing to let him off that easily. And where've you been? You haven't come by to see me in forever. I was here a few days ago. Naruto pointed out, remembering the day before Naruto's karate club fight where he'd helped Kenichi touch up his defensive movement after he'd trained with Mio. It wasn't my fault you weren't paying attention when I walked in. Too much TV'll rot your brain tidbit. Like yours? And don't call me that. The girl said, scrambling up Naruto's back, using his backpack as an anchor to reach his head so she could start pulling on his cheeks and hair. It is so your fault. You don't make footsteps when you walk through the house on purpose. How am I supposed to know? Naruto basically ignored the pestering and walked inside of the house, shutting the door behind him before kicking off his shoes and walking upstairs. From elsewhere in the house, an adult voice called out, "Anoka, I heard you let someone in. Who's at the door?" Oh, thank goodness it was Kenichi's mother. His father didn't like him, and he owned a shotgun that he had no problems with pulling out at a moment's notice. "It's Lemonhead." Naruto grabbed Anoka over his shoulder and held her upside down before responding to the voice he heard earlier. "Hey Shirahama-san, I'm just here to grab Kenichi for a while." He then turned his attention to Anoka, who he was still holding upside down as he climbed the stairs. "Now what did I tell you about calling me Lemonhead? That's not cool tidbit," he said in an annoyed voice. "What did I tell you about calling me that?" Anoka responded with a just as annoyed pout, not caring that Naruto held her in such a precarious position. He'd done that 1,000 times already. He never dropped her. "I'm not that little." She definitely didn't like the amused look on his face. "I'm not even trying to hold you up right now. You're definitely that little." With that being said, as he reached the top of the stairs, he flipped her back upright and set her back on her feet. "Is your brother ready to go? I want to get this over with as soon as possible." Anoka tried to look at Naruto's feet and mimic how he was walking to get the effect of the floor not creaking beneath him, but she couldn't see how it was any different from walking normally. "You're going to that girl's house too?" The youngest Shirahama seemed a bit miffed at her brother going to another girl's house. She was the only girl that was supposed to get his attention like that, and now Naruto was helping him. She had a bit of a brother complex. What's going on? Of course, she didn't know. Kenichi never told Anoka or his parents about any of the problems he was having. So, Naruto probably shouldn't say anything about hulking Gorilla Mark II that wished to extract blood from her brother's face via fisticuffs. "Man stuff," Naruto said as they reached Kenichi's doorway with Naruto knocking on it, startling Kenichi out of studying the map Mio drew for him. "You can ditch that thing, by the way. I know how to get there from here." He was not going to ditch it. He was going to save it as the first thing he got from Mio and saved it on his desk to do just that. Even the way she drew maps happened to be cute. Hard to translate into real, useful directions, but cute nonetheless. Either way, dressed in a simple white t-shirt and black pants, he grabbed his bundled-up karate clothes and got up to head out the door. The pair set out with the entire day ahead of them. The sunny, bright, pleasant weather seemed to taunt Naruto, who felt it would have been better for there to be storm clouds on the horizon, preparing to drench the town in rain. But once again his feet carried him all the way to the destination ahead of them. Kenichi had to notice that all the way there, Naruto looked like a beaten man. But eventually they stopped outside of the largest pair of gates Kenichi had ever seen in his life, the only entrance to the whole walled-off place. It looked more like the Evil Island base from Enter the Dragon than a place where someone like him could learn martial arts. It was extremely imposing. Kenichi didn't even know that a place like existed in town. "All right," Naruto eventually said, standing next to Kenichi with his fingers twitching in anticipation. "You ready?" He'd let him drink in the sight for long enough. It was time for action. Time was wasting. "Yeah," Kenichi said after a gulp of fear. For some reason Naruto was getting a deep sense of déjà vu from this scenario, but he let it slide in exchange for listening to his friend. "I came all this way. So let's do this," he said, stepping forward and pushing at the gate in vain. He wasn't going to open that thing as he was, even putting both hands and his entire body into it. "Gah, what's with this thing? I can't budge it." Naruto slowly slipped out of Kenichi's sight and backed up a few steps, bouncing on his toes before jumping forward and landing a forceful kick just above where Kenichi was pushing to help him out. As Kenichi fell forward once the door gave way a smidge enough to open, Naruto landed on the ground behind him, Kenichi never seeing him do what he had just done. Walking forward, Naruto picked Kenichi up off of the ground and dusted him off. "Come on Kenichi. Seriously, you've got to start bracing yourself. Now come on, you've got to present yourself." At that Kenichi nodded resolutely and stood ramrod straight, hands at his side. "Hello," he bellowed at the top of his voice. "I'd been recommended to come here to learn the martial arts by a friend of mine, Furinji Myo." Naruto had not been expecting that. He covered his ears at the sudden volume and then reality set in as to where he was, and the fact that he didn't even have the cover of darkness this time to try and help. Why did Kenichi have to have a flair for the dramatic? It had to be all of those books he read. His first instinct was to turn and run. He'd done what he needed to do. He'd taken his best friend to a place that he could better himself through hardship. And now he had to preserve his own health by leaving, only to feel a very familiar presence behind them before Kenichi even finished his loud proclamation and bowed in anticipation for anyone to come out in front of them. Oh my god, he's even bigger in broad daylight than he is at night. Naruto thought to himself, slowly backing up away from the towering figure to the front of where Kenichi was bowing, still anticipating someone to greet them from his front. Naruto picked him up and turned him directly around where Kenichi let out a small yelp of shock at the sight of the man before them. Perhaps the tallest human being that Kenichi had ever seen, the man had long blonde hair and some age in his face to go with the blonde beard and mustache on it and his strong-looking eyebrows. He wore a very long robe with a black belt tied around his waist and simple sandals on his feet. The length and size of the robe did nothing to hide the fact that he was one great mass of muscle, and underneath his sleeves on his hands he wore some kind of fist guards. He didn't seem to be looking down at either Naruto or Kenichi, instead staring straight ahead over their heads, but in their general direction. Yes? He said in a very wise but still strong and energetic voice, "How may I help you today? What brings you to our humble dojo?" Naruto kept chanting in his head for Kenichi to talk, and hearing how the man spoke to him gave him confidence to step forward and do just that. "Well, you see, are you by any chance a martial arts master?" "Well..." The old man took on a rather humble expression on his face as he stroked his beard with a smile. "I wouldn't exactly call myself that expert, but I've never lost a single fight even since my youth." Naruto was glaring as many daggers as he could muster at him for downplaying himself the way he just had. He wanted to call bullshit, but he hadn't been sent to the moon yet and he kind of liked it that way. Furinji Hayato was just the man for the job. He was the man for the job. "My name is Shirahama Kenichi," he said with another bow. "I would like to know if you teach the martial arts. Furinji Nyo recommended your dojo to me. Did she now?" "Nyo did?" Hayato said, amused somewhat before walking past Kenichi and Naruto, still not looking down at the two of them. "Well then, follow me." "Yes, we do teach the martial arts." Kenichi went to follow him before he realized that Naruto hadn't moved. "What's wrong?" he asked Naruto, who shook his head and pulled his goggles down over his eyes to hide them from giving away any more tells. "You aren't coming?" "I'm not," Naruto said, giving his friend a thumbs up. "For support's sake, you're the one that wants to train here though, so go for it. Naruto-san, come on. I've never done anything like this before. I don't know what I'm getting into." "No, you really freaking didn't. You didn't at all. I'm just asking you to tour this place with me. Come on, we've got to catch up or we'll make a bad first impression." "I already made a bad first impression," Naruto shouted in his head, "and second, and third, and fourth, and whatever times impression I'm up to by now." Why he hadn't been kicked the FCK out yet he didn't know, but for the time being he was getting a close look at the dojo without fear of being murdered for a misstep. Yet, even if he got his lights dimmed in the next 5 minutes, that 5 minutes of intel could help him immensely. With that, both Kenichi and Naruto jogged to catch up with the apparent elder of the dojo in time to turn the corner to the dojo building and see a massive man destroying a heavy bag with mid-ranged roundhouse kicks. And then a stone statue. And then a tree. And then the inside of the wall. All while shouting, "Apapapapapa. What the hell?" Kenichi screeched in shock and horror at the strength. Extremely tall and muscular with lightly darkened skin and short spiky white hair, the man wore a yellow tank top and red shorts with a Muay Thai headband around his head and bandages wrapped around his hands and feet. While the old man explained who that was as if he wasn't a dangerous human being, Naruto had his own thoughts. "The guy with the record around here for almost killing me when he finds me. Apachai Hapachai, the Muay Thai death god of the martial arts underworld." It wasn't even funny how hard that guy hit him. And it never seemed to be with ill intent either. Even so, he'd given Naruto by far the absolute worst wound of his entire life. It had actually been the wound that made Shikamaru give up, and it hadn't even happened to him. "What kind of place is this?" Kenichi whispered to Naruto as they continued onward. "Just keep going." Naruto turned left to look inside of the slightly ajar sliding door of the dojo only to see another master, Shigure, seemingly meditating with her sword, thus he tried to shove Kenichi along. Go, go, go. He was not getting cut today. What? Why? Looking inside, he stopped and noted the woman's beauty. Wow. I knew Mio had something to do with this place, but that girl is really pretty. She then quick drew her sword, cutting through the circle of candles surrounding her and the tips of the spears that had been stood up around her as well. A sword? Kenichi thought in fear, before the girl turned to look at him and he was caught staring, and she can cut through other weapons? You. She said with no discernible expression on her face. But she wasn't talking to Kenichi the way he thought. She was talking to Naruto, who didn't say anything. If she hadn't cut him, yet he wasn't going to push his luck. He turned and walked away. It had been working so far. Why not keep it up? Due to him leaving and Kenichi quickly following, they never heard the latter part of what she had to say. Ninja boy. As he reached the end of the outside floor of the dojo, he heard an older man's voice speak to him. Thanks, Ninja Kid. Walking to the edge and looking over, Naruto saw a short old man poking halfway out from underneath the floor holding a camera to his chest. He had a thick black mustache and black hair jutting out from underneath his black derby hat. The rest of his clothing looked like a stereotypical Chinese martial artist's apparel in the color of green. I got some primo pictures and never got caught. I'll be sure to reward you for the interference later. By letting me get what I want from this place without kicking my ass? Naruto asked hopefully, only getting a laugh from the old man as he slid himself back underneath the porch just as Kenichi caught up to him to see. Of course not. I meant copies of these lovely shots when I get around to making them. I'll plant them on your body for you when you wake up. Ma-kensei is a perv. Naruto said, shoving his hands in his pockets as Kenichi looked at him confusedly. Ma-kensei is also the best Chinese martial artist in the world, as far as I know. He was also one of only 2 masters here that didn't beat him to a bloody pulp whenever he showed up. Kensei preferred softer techniques. The best? Remember what you asked me about dojos before? This isn't just any old place with people teaching and learning how to fight. Naruto pointed to the overall grounds, getting Kenichi to take a vast look around. This is where the best is. Ryuzanpaku is the pinnacle of martial arts, and if you can survive it, you're one of the best. That sounded amazing. The very best? And if he could train here and make it through, he could be too? That was exactly what he wanted. To prove that someone could be strong and just. To be strong enough to keep bad people from harming his friends and family. So, he could protect Mio. Naruto was dash. Wait, Naruto, why do you know so much about this place? Kenichi asked as they continued on after the elder of the dojo who had politely been waiting on them around the other side of the dojo building. You're not explaining anything to me. What's wrong? Naruto didn't sound excited at all about much of what he was saying. I'll tell you later on the way home. Naruto said as he stared at Hayato outright, no longer caring if the elder knew who he was in the daylight or not. He obviously did. Was the old man messing with him? He had to be. Clicking his tongue, Naruto just sat down on the floor, legs dangling off of the side. Keep on going. I'll be right here. I just want to think for a bit. A hand was set on Kenichi's shoulder by the towering old man who stood right by him. Let's go meet the karate teacher. Hearing about karate excited Kenichi, but his friend seemed a bit down in the mouth. Naruto mustered up a big smile and shooed him off until they went back inside. I don't train anyone. That's my motto. The guy in second place for people that have almost killed me the most. Naruto thought to himself instinctively upon hearing the loud, angry voice shout out, Sakaki Shio, the 100 Dan Street Brawler. Does that rank even go that high? What was going on here? Why wasn't he a stain on the grass or the floor yet? Oh, you came. Looking up from what he knew already to be the main house where the elder of the house in Mio stayed, he saw the girl herself wearing the normal purple leotard he was used to seeing her in with a paw print patterned apron over it. No glasses and her hair were down as it always was outside of school. Where is Kenichi? She asked as she walked over to him. Your scary-ass grandpa is showing him around. Naruto said, his voice sounding more down than she'd ever heard him. Even when he was losing fights against her, he'd never sounded so burnt out. Mio-chan, are you guys messing with me? Huh? She asked, looking confused by what he was saying. Of course not. What do you mean by that? Nobody's blitzed me yet. Naruto said, looking around at the entire premises that he had a pretty decent view of. You haven't even attacked me yet. It's confusing. Not really. Mio smiled at him and set a hand on his shoulder. The first time you called here to get me for Kenichi, I told everyone that you and I were friends and told them your name. So Grandpa made them all agree not to attack you on sight anymore unless you were sneaking around again. Naruto smiled a bit bitterly and bent over enough to set his chin on his knees. Wow. You guys really don't see me as a threat at all, do you? Well, you're strong for a disciple class. Mio pointed out, tapping at her chin in thought, but they're all masters. Whatever you keep coming here for, it obviously isn't to kill anyone, she said, switching to patting him on the head. What do you keep coming here for anyway? I can't tell you that. Naruto said with a laughing grin, if you knew you'd protect it better and then I'd be screwed. I only have 2 advantages left over Ryu Zanpaku, Naruto said, holding up those 2 fingers. First is that you don't know where I live. The second is that you don't know what I want. It is true enough. You're rather difficult to find for a child, even though we know your name now. He could feel the presence standing behind him and knew him as the second man that could defeat him but leave him healthy enough to walk home after knocking him out. Koetsuji Akasame, the philosophical jujitsu master. A man with messy brown hair and a red and white hakama, he had a thin mustache and solid white eyes that seemed to always be analyzing everything, including him at the moment. Hello Koetsuji-san. Mio greeted, turning around to smile up at him as he stood over her and Naruto. It's strange, isn't it? Seeing Naruto-kun and not trying to stop him from doing whatever he wanted on the grounds. Akasame nodded in agreement with a hand on his chin. Indeed it is. I've always wanted to speak with the rude little boy that always managed to sneak into our dojo. You're quite the determined one, aren't you? Repeatedly challenging masters the way you do. I'm not challenging you. Naruto said with a haughty sniff, I'm robbing you. I never want to fight any of you, it just happens. And then you chuck me over the wall. Well, Kensei, and I treat you after we confront you while you're unconscious. Akasame corrected matter-of-factly, then we throw you back over the wall. Because that was so much better. You've tried this around 72 times over the last 4 years, by my count. Unless I'm missing any that no one said anything about. Why don't you ever kill me? Practitioners of Katsujinkan, Fist of Life, never take lives by intention, even those of Satsujinkan, Fist of Killing, affiliation. But I'm a ninja. Ninjas get killed when they get caught. You've never directly threatened any of our lives. Because this mission isn't an assassination. Naruto said with a raised eyebrow, I don't want to try to kill you. It's not an objective. I won't kill anyone I don't have to. It's the easy way out. It's a stereotype as far as I'm concerned that a ninja has to be a cold-blooded killer, and I don't believe in it. Akasame just stared at Naruto for a short time before turning and walking away. What an interesting boy. A ninja that refuses to kill outside of direct orders to do so, even though he expects it from any other opponent. How strange. Akasame had dealt with ninjas before, and killing had usually been the first option for them, no matter what in his experiences. They were most assuredly Satsujinkan. Naruto wasn't Katsujinkan by his own recent admission, but he didn't endeavor to destroy his foes with his attacks the way every other Satsujinkan fighter did. One couldn't exist in the middle forever though. Eventually, if he was to grow as strong as he could, he'd have to lean over to one side or the other. He'd never seen a true master represent both. Whatever. Naruto said, brushing his nose with his thumb at apparently being ignored or snubbed by Akasame. The only reason I'm here today is to try and help Kenichi get motivated to train here. It was good of you to do that even though it must have been hard to come here. Mio told him, smiling adorably at him. It was an inner defense breaker. He. Naruto said, breaking out of his surly mood with an ego-raging grin, it wasn't that hard. Sometimes you've got to be the bigger man and fall on a grenade or two for the greater good. As long as Kenichi gets as strong as he needs to be here, that's fine. We're getting a new student? Akasame thought to himself as he opened the door to the dojo, a smile growing on his face. This is quite the day. He'd have to go easy to make sure he didn't scare the young man, whoever he was, away. That evening, Kenichi woke up feeling himself being carried over someone's shoulders. That Akasame man, he told him that he wasn't that strict a trainer? All of those absurd strength and balance exercises? Running and dragging him on a tire all the way to the farthest train station in the town? And everything else that went into what he called light conditioning? His body was a sore wreck. But oh, Mio had been so supportive when she'd told him to keep trying hard. It was worth it. Seeing her smile at him like that and believe in him was worth it. But how was he getting home? Kenichi, you handled those exercises like a champ for your first day. Was that Naruto's voice? Naruto was carrying him? If you stopped all of the screaming and complaining though you wouldn't get tired as fast. Naruto-san? A weary Kenichi said, is that you? He was too weak to push himself up and turn his head to see, but the sturdy backpack that his frame was partly resting on sure seemed like Naruto's. You can't carry me home? Can you? Yeah, I can. Naruto said in a dry tone of voice. Why? You're not strong. Well, I don't know about that. Naruto said in the same manner, knowing that Kenichi was so exhausted he'd never remember a single part of this conversation. Hitting the wall for the first time was a bitch to every part of your body, even your mind, and he was there to help. I'm a ninja. He did promise he'd tell him later. If Kenichi didn't remember it after he woke up, that wasn't his fault. Oh. Kenichi said, shutting his eyes again to get some rest. Okay then. Night. Night, bud. A week later, Koryo High School. Kenichi's training was proceeding as normal. Gruelingly. But there was still the matter of the man that wanted to clobber him to see if he was actually strong, and he had taken to looking for him at random points in the day in places where he knew he'd be. Luckily, his best friend was pretty much the best person anyone could have to show them places to hide, and Kenichi wasn't a noticeable guy. Thus in between classes and at lunch Naruto and Mio would stash him in places to hide and find indirect ways for him to move around the school. It even led to Kenichi's first roof hop. Naruto was so proud. And Kenichi had questions when he saw Naruto clear gaps just as casually as Mio did. He clearly did not remember what Naruto had told him on the first day of his training. Either way, it was still a problem since Kenichi had absolutely no techniques under his belt, and only enough conditioning to be able to walk himself home every day after practice at Ryuzanpaku. Naruto had to get back to his own training and planning at home. Now that he'd seen the inside of Ryuzanpaku during the daytime, he'd gotten a better view of the terrain than he had at night while he had to keep an eye out for someone to catch him, but since he'd only been able to go into and around the dojo building, he still had no idea where those damnable swords were. The current day went as normally, with Kenichi being hidden in random areas that no one would look for him in, until the very end of the day when seconds after the bell rang, the gigantic man that had refereed Kenichi's fight walked into the room, rolling 2 walnuts around in one hand as he looked at the other few students that had remained in there for lunch, all looking quite intimidated at his presence. Tsukuba-senpai. More than a few of them muttered at the sight of him. He'd been like a cloud hanging around the classroom for days. The only thing he wanted was to find and fight Kenichi, and no one was talking. Useless idiots don't know where to find Shirahama. But on this day, he noticed the same guy that had run into the karate club room to gloat after Kenichi had won against Daimonji. Walking over to Naruto, the rest of the class just silently watched as he slammed his hands on Naruto's desk hard enough to leave handprints in the wood. Where's Shirahama? Let's see that bastard get loud now. You're his pal, right? The only person willing to hang out with someone so sorry. I guess that makes you sorrier than him. Let's see. Naruto said, not looking up to make eye contact with the man. I don't know about that, but if you've been looking for Kenichi all day you probably didn't sit down and eat for the whole period. I think I've got a banana in here somewhere. You want it? It sounded like he was being nice and trying to defuse the situation, but it really wasn't since Naruto openly referred to the entire karate club as gorillas. It was an inside joke that only the rest of the class got, and due to that they all slid farther away from where Naruto was. Tsukuba grabbed Naruto's arm before he could reach into his bag and set it back on the table. I don't want your food. I want Shirahama. I've been waiting to fight that coward for a week. Mio's eyes darted to a certain spot in the room for a split second, but Naruto kept his eyes right on Tsukuba now that he was grabbing his arm. Now I'll ask you one more time. Where is he? Not here. He's been leaving every day first thing. I guess I'll send him a message then. Take it for me, would you? Tsukuba said, gripping Naruto's arm tighter than before. Naruto sighed and stood up out of his seat. Fine. Come on. Follow me. There are a few places he could be, trying to wait you out. Tsukuba nodded and let go of Naruto's arm forcefully before he followed him out of the room so that he could take him to where Kenichi was hiding from him. The door shut with a forceful slam that reverberated through the room, and just like that the spell of silence over the students fell. Oh man. Shirahama is so dead. That weird kid Naruto is going to sell out his friend like that? How lame. He had to. If he didn't, Tsukuba-senpai was going to kill him. The ceiling of the room started bumping around before, much to the surprise of the rest of the class, Kenichi threw a tile that slid open and slammed through several desks below him. Myo immediately ran over to him as he started getting up. Kenichi, are you alright? When Naruto gets to wherever he's taking that guy and I'm not there, he's going to be livid, Kenichi said, pointing at the handprints that Tsukuba had left in Naruto's desk just from slamming his hands on them. Naruto-san's not going to walk away from that. Dodging me a few weeks ago isn't like dodging a real fighter. It'll be alright, just trust him. This isn't right, Kenichi said, stepping to the door to try and find them before the worst could occur. This is the kind of thing I want to be strong to stop. I want to be able to say something's wrong out loud and actually have the strength to change it. I want to be able to protect the people around me like Yo Dash. He stopped himself before he could effectively confess that he was into her before he got back on course. I can't let Naruto get destroyed trying to cover my training. Kenichi-kun, it'll be okay, Nyo assured him, missing his slip-up. I thought he'd told you already. The first day that we watched you train, he told me he'd let you know about him. He promised. Told me what? Elsewhere in the school, the doors to the gym supply shed opened up and Naruto stepped in first, flipping the light switch to turn on the dim lights of the room. As Tsukuba followed behind him, Naruto made a great effort to peer inside before he threw his hands out to the side. Man, he's not here either? He didn't tell me he got new hiding spots. Tsukuba slammed the door to the shed shut with a loud bang. That enough? You've been taking me around this entire damn school showing me empty rooms, bathrooms, the roof. I'm tired of your shit. Hey! Hey! You think I want to fight? Naruto asked, backing off into the fairly large equipment room with his hands up. No. Just calm down. Why do you want to fight Kenichi anyway? Did him winning piss you off that much? I don't give a crap about what he did to Daimonji, Tsukuba said, turning over entire cases of things out of anger. Ragnarok can't have uninvited upstarts popping up on our turf. Any people out there seen as strong that aren't in Ragnarok are targets. Ragnarok? That stupid gang that some of the students at the school were members of? Great. He knew Tsukuba had gang connections, and this was the last thing they needed. Some kind of low-level gang boss trying to look tough and consolidate his own influence. There was no way he'd stop until he beat Kenichi down. That wasn't going to happen. Look, Kenichi just wants to train in the martial arts. Naruto continued, trying to talk the situation down. He left your club. He isn't even trying to fight in school. Just back off already. He won one fight. You're making an ass out of me, Tsukuba said, turning around to punch a big hole into the wall of the shed with a loud crunch. The action only took a moment, but when he turned back around, Naruto wasn't in sight at all. What? The room was pretty shadowy, but it was just equipment racks and open crates. There could only be so many places that the coward was hiding. Tsukuba went to the closet with lacrosse and field hockey sticks and opened it up only to find nothing but said gear inside. There wasn't any way he could be in too many other places, so he just walked back to the door and stood in his karate stance to wait him out. Fine. If I can't fight Shirahama, I'll just have to crush you for wasting my time. Naruto's voice started echoing out through the shed. Instead of the complying tone he'd been using before to try and appease Tsukuba into backing off, it seemed like all bets were off now. You think you're strong? You think that just because you've got a black belt that you're a badass? Well, come get me, Mr. Badass. I'm not going anywhere. Or did all of those steroids you took to get those muscles shrink your brain as much as they shrank something else? An enraged Tsukuba kicked over several crates in the shed large enough for a person to hide in, but there was still nothing for him to discover inside of them. Come out. Running your mouth like that just signed your death certificate. Why don't you show your face and back that up? No. And with that, 3 javelins flew through the air and stabbed into the door one after the other with horrible thumps. I don't think I've tried anything on anyone weaker than me in years. I feel weird about it. Who was he calling weak? If you don't come out, I'll kill you. Tsukuba barked, spittle flying from his mouth as he continued looking around for seemingly nothing. Hiding in the dark doesn't make you strong. Come out and prove it. Due to the way the lightbulb shades of the shed aimed down to focus the light, he never saw the figure on the ceiling holding on up there in the dark, with a prime position for ambush. Okay. And with that he let go and dropped onto his victim. Elsewhere on the school grounds, Kenichi ran through the halls, not caring if he ran into Tsukuba or not any longer. He had to find his best friend. Myo was following behind him, acting as if his best run wasn't even close to being fast enough to exhaust her. I'm telling you, Naruto-kun is fine. Finally, having run out of ideas for places where Naruto would have tried to lead someone away to, Kenichi stopped by the footlockers on the first floor and sank down against them. I can't find him anyway. I hope he's alright. Well, if you're asking about your friend Dash. Nijima's sudden appearance on the top of the lockers Kenichi was sitting against startled him into standing up and jumping away. I happen to have info that says that Uzumaki Naruto was seen heading out toward the fields out back with Tsukuba-senpai. Kenichi didn't need to hear anything else before he got up and sprinted for the track outside. Past that he would find the shed that held all of the athletic equipment with 3 dangerous javelins stabbing out of the side of it. Ayo! After the loud blood-curdling scream, 3 loud thumping bangs came from the shed and Kenichi turned on the afterburners in time to see the javelins get pulled out of the door. The door was then thrown open and Naruto walked out holding a torn handful of what had been Tsukuba's white uniform shirt that he was using to wipe his fist off. Upon seeing Kenichi and Myo, he grinned. Yeah, guess what? I found out why this guy is after you. You need to train harder, because Ragnarok thinks you're an upstart. Kenichi's jaw dropped at Naruto being the one that walked out of the wreck-looking shed and ran past him to look inside where he saw Tsukuba sitting in the last dent his body made in the wall, shirt torn and blood from his nose and mouth pouring down his chest. Slowly turning back around where Naruto had tossed the segment of shirt aside, Kenichi slowly walked up to him and spoke in a ghastly voice. How, in the world, did you do that? I told you already. Naruto said with a shrug, I'm a ninja. It was easier to say the second time. Kenichi just stared at him before his outburst occurred. A ninja? Yes. A ninja. Nijima appeared out of nowhere, sticking his PDA right in Kenichi's face. My sources are never wrong. I knew it all along. And now I'm going to have a voiced confession and pictures for the school paper. Naruto just stared at Nijima for several seconds, contemplating making him disappear, but thought against it. Even if people in the school knew he was a ninja, who cared? Ryu Zanpaku already did. His cover had already been blown for years. It was never going to get any further than that, and even if it spread further than that the second he finished his mission, the next one wouldn't possibly be in the same town. Yeah, I'm a ninja. I never said I wasn't. You've been a ninja all this time and I never found out? Kenichi asked, quieter than before but still very loudly. Wait, what were you saying about Ragnarok? You mean that gang, right? Yes. Nijima said, moving between Naruto and Kenichi as he pat them both on the shoulder. Tsukuba-senpai was a useful underling of this school's Ragnarok representative, Valkyrie. You two will probably be targeted after this as the man that started all of it and the one that stood at his side, Kikik. He didn't sound sorry about such a thing, actually interested in seeing how it would play out apparently. Ryuzampaka Dojo, secondary dwelling, later that day. Kenichi sat down and slowly absorbed everything that Naruto had told him since their arrival to his place of training. He had already changed into his dogi and was ready to practice, but Naruto had to explain things to him first. So, you're a ninja, trained since you were little, here on a mission to steal something of great value from Ryuzampaku. Yep. And for the last 4 years you've been a normal kid during the day, but at night or outside of school you'd constantly try to make plans to break in and always wound up being stopped by the masters and Myo-san? Well, she doesn't stop me as much as the others. Naruto said as he took a drink of the tea that Myo had brought for everyone to enjoy while the conversation was going on. We usually trade wins back and forth, because we're kind of even, but the masters just dash, poo. Naruto imitated the sound of slashing and ran a finger across his neck, every time. It's terrible. Every adult in this room has almost killed me at least once. Appa. Appachai is sorry. Appachai said bashfully. The Taiman raised his hand as if he were being admonished in school and spoke in his difficult Japanese. Didn't mean to use elbow on Ninja Boy the first time. Just reflex, APA. Right, Sakaki? Another man in the room just chuckled with his arms crossed over his broad chest. He was tall and burly with black slicked back hair, tan skin, and a broad horizontal scar that ran across the bridge of his nose. He wore blue jeans and an open brown leather jacket with the sleeves rolled up past his elbows to expose his massive muscles and taped wrists. Yeah, it was an accident. Don't go throwing sharp weapons and I won't respond the way I did that one time. I'm not letting any of you jerks get close to me when you find me if I can help it. Especially you two. Naruto shouted, jumping up off of the ground to glare at the karate master, and you kicked me through the goddamn dojo wall. At least I didn't throw you over a wall that time. Sakaki said with a bellowing laugh as he took a swig from his beer bottle. Oh wait, I did after I picked your carcass up off of the ground. Never mind. Wahahaha, all of my hate. Naruto shouted back at him even though he kept laughing at his past expense, effectively ignoring his aforementioned hate. Eventually Naruto reached into his pocket and fished out a coin that he threw at a bottle cap on the floor that then flipped up to hit Sakaki in the face. It never got close to making it though, but it did make the man stop and glare at him. Naruto probably would have taken that beating freely. At least he would have regained a bit of his self-respect for it. Don't try that environmental attack crap of yours on me, kid. You don't cover it up well enough to catch a real master by surprise. Wow. Kenichi thought to himself, what kind of technique was that? Modest, ain't we? Naruto said right back before bracing for a hit that never came. What? I'm still awake? He then noticed that Sakaki hadn't budged other than remaining seated, still glaring at him. Oh, that's right. They can't hit me unless I'm doing something shady. Nyo walked up to Kenichi and handed him a drink that he took before beckoning her to come closer, which she did as he whispered in her ear, so, you've been fighting Naruto-san for years. A happy nod confirmed that they'd been friends for a long time. Is Naruto as strong as you? It depends. Nyo explained vaguely, let's see. Most of the time Grandpa just knocks him back over the wall when we fight, but I've knocked him out 3 times and made him run away 5 times. Ears burning, Naruto turned around and gave his side of the story. Yeah? Well, I've wound up knocking her out twice and subduing her 4 times. And he wouldn't say that Hayato knocked him over the wall. Technically that was right, but it wasn't close to the extent of it. Subduing and knocking out aren't the same thing? Kenichi wondered aloud. No, I trap her mostly when I win. Naruto said, Nyo-chan's a better fighter than me. If we just fought like you'd fight her she'd probably eventually win, but I can do stuff sometimes that'll throw her off. I'm Kagi. Is that what he's calling it, Kagi? Kensei said, aiming his camera up into the rafters to try and take a picture underneath Shigure's skirt, but she wasn't giving the diminutive Chinese master an angle to get a shot from much to his displeasure. What a nice way to call himself devious. He simultaneously reached out a hand to attempt to grope Nyo's boobs, but she saw it coming and moved along to continue serving the others. Now, enough picking on our guest. Akasame said before focusing on Kenichi, you're being targeted by a gang. What do you plan on doing to handle it? Your situation is only going to get worse. I don't know. Kenichi said before looking over at Nyo, who was still dutifully serving the masters of the dojo refreshments. He didn't want her to have to protect him and keep having to look out for him, but I can't let people like that go after me and try to go through the people I care about to do it. I'll take whatever I have to if I can stop that from happening. I guess your muscles are conditioned enough to begin learning jujitsu technique from me then. I wonder how he would do with some Chinese kenpo. Appachai wants to teach Kenichi strong Muay Thai. Let's make sure he can survive me before that Appachai. If he can't last 3 days in my karate training, he won't survive yours for one. Hearing that people actually wanted to train their newest disciple got Naruto to bump Kenichi with his elbow. Well, it looks like you don't have to worry about how you're going to get stronger. If you make it through all of that you should be just fine. At least 4 fighting styles? Lucky dog. Kenichi was sweating to himself, since all of them seemed to be looking at him conspiratorially and he wasn't a fan of those eyes that the masters were conversing amongst themselves with, shooting glances at him every now and then while they talked about training plans, right? He replied unsurely, and now that I train here you don't have to go through with your mission to steal from Ryuzanpaku. I'm still doing that. Kenichi replied in disbelief, but I train here now. Aren't we friends? Naruto nodded, of course, and I'm friends with Nyo-chan too. He said as said girl sat down on her knees right by them with a smile, but I've been doing this before I met you, and it's way bigger than just me. There's no way I'm stopping just because you train here. Just make sure that you're never in the way when I try, because I won't take it easy on you. I won't have the time to. Sakaki came over and slammed a firm, large hand on Kenichi's shoulder. Oh, don't sweat him. If you're ever here when he makes an attempt, you'll be fine. It won't be a problem. A hopeful Kenichi looked up at the scar-faced man. Does that mean that you think I've got potential to eventually match Naruto-san? Everyone went silent before they all started laughing in unison, even Myo. Kenichi didn't find it very funny and felt lower than the floor at the perceived humor of the question. You didn't have to put it that way. Ma Kensei slid over to Naruto's side, accentuating his lack of height by being able to post his hand on Naruto's shoulder to lean on him. Sakaki didn't mean it like that. He just meant that if Naruto here ever comes across you while he's skulking around, he won't kill you when he subdues you. He might even leave you conscious. Mio nodded in frantic agreement, having had it happen to her in the past, all the while having to fend off rapid sticky hands from Kensei the entire time. So I don't have Naruto's potential? Oh that? Well, the thing is, you don't really have any potential, at all. From Naruto's point of view, this was absolutely surreal. He'd spent 4 years doing anything he could to get into Ryuzanpaku and rip them off, but now they'd actually let him in and were conversing with him like he was desired company. Looking up, he saw Shigure hanging out on the support beams above the floor, just allowing everything down below to happen without taking part in it. Naruto waved up at her only to get a blank stare in return. Okay, so most of them were conversing with him like he was desired company. That was still better than attacking on sight. What's the matter, Naruto-kun? You don't seem very comfortable. Mio asked him, curiously wondering why Naruto always seemed to be shifting about and walking on eggshells whenever he was on the property. It was the same way he'd been at first when he'd started spending time around her after Kenichi introduced them. Is there anything I can do? No, it's nothing with what's going on. This is great. Naruto said, rubbing the back of his head sheepishly. It's just, how can I sit here, talk with you, drink your tea, eat your snacks, eventually try to steal something priceless from here, and look you in the eye ever again? Like he'd said before, he never hated her. It was just a mission that he had to complete if he ever wanted to continue his ninja career. But instead of getting easier over time, it seemed to keep getting complicated. I have to do my mission. But if I do it, I'll lose one and now maybe both of my friends. Shikamaru might have been right. This might have been impossible. Like I said. Mio said, not dropping her lovely mood for even a second. As far as I'm concerned, we're friends and rivals too. If you ever do take what you're after and can really get away with it, that'll just prove you're better, won't it? And you won't ever try to kill me or any of us, would you? Naruto's eyes hardened and he shook his head. Akasame interjected upon hearing Naruto's own concerns. Even children that weren't under his wing as a disciple could use some guidance every now and then. We can deal with the loss of a possession no matter what it is. That doesn't mean that we'll merely let you enter and leave with it, however. That is a different matter entirely. It's just a matter of you being man enough to find a way to take it. Sakaki said with a dark grin, personally, I don't think you'll ever get it done in 100 years, especially with all of us masters being here. So, you won't ever have to worry about that brat. Naruto just growled at him. That man just got a kick out of pushing his buttons. He is a good person. Shigure eventually said, still not straying from her roost, he is a ninja that does not reek of blood. Rare. Almost impossible. You guys are really making it hard for me to want to rob you, you know. Naruto then looked over at Kenichi, who was still grousing about, what's eating you? My best friend was a hidden prodigy ninja this whole time. You're still on about that? I wouldn't call Uzumaki-san a prodigy. Hayato said in a loud voice as he finally walked into the dojo, getting all attention set on him. Not even close really. But you asked about his potential compared to yours. Calling him a prodigy would be like saying you had a talent for martial arts. Both Naruto and Kenichi just stared at him, wondering if he had a point other than bluntly putting them both down in the same comparison. His potential is an entirely different thing altogether. Naruto was about to open his mouth and shout out that if he wasn't a prodigy, why did his village let him leave 4 years early with a mission to deal with those superhumans? But he wasn't going to use his clan's name or speak of the island on which he trained. That was a rule they'd given him when taking him to Japan. He could not use direct names to attribute his origin to them. A few weeks later, town streets. This time. We'll definitely get him this time. Kenichi and Mio thought to themselves as they walked down the street from school with Naruto somewhat in front of them. Ever since Naruto's ninja affiliation became known by people, things had begun changing a bit in that place. Just where does he live? The 3 best members of Ragnarok member Valkyrie's gang had been set forth to do something about them. But the thing about that was that it should have resulted in a confrontation by now under the previous circumstances before Naruto's being a ninja became common knowledge. Since he no longer had to hide the fact that he was a ninja, he could openly do odd things that would have been too quirky before to get away with and keep his secret. This included the all-important disappearing without a trace out of the blue trick so that no one in class other than Mio could tell where he was. This was what he'd done with her to help Kenichi hide earlier, just now on a way more blatant scale. Fighting head-on was never his first choice to deal with people, even if he did like the possible challenge from time to time. That could be Kenichi's thing. If he had to fight, he would, but he wasn't going to make it easy for anyone. Either way, this had to end in a hurry. It was already detracting from his all-important mission, and he could swear he was getting closer to finally accomplishing it, but yet another wall went up in his way. "You guys have got to stop trying to find out where I live," Naruto asked when he finally led them past the street that should have been the turn to start to Ryuzanpaku. "Can't I just have this? But you know where both of us live." Mio supplied helpfully as to their reasoning. "We've already told you that we don't care if you keep trying to achieve your mission, so I don't know why you're still hiding it." Home phone number 2. Air. Kenichi moved close to Mio to whisper in her ear, "Naruto-san doesn't have a landline at all, and he only uses disposable phones so he can keep changing his number." Wow, in hindsight he really should have seen the whole ninja thing coming. That was pretty shifty. I think he did the first thing so that he didn't show up in the phone book. Ah. Wow, that's so smart. Really ninja-like. No. Naruto said with a cough and a red blush on his cheeks, "I just keep forgetting to pay certain bills on time all of the time." If his house's mortgage wasn't automatically taken out of the funds his parents had left for him, he probably would have been foreclosed on with as many bills as he forgotten. Anyway, why does it matter so much to you guys? Kenichi tried to say for no particular reason, but Mo beat him to the punch with the actual reason. They wanted to know where Naruto lived. Because whenever you stop by Ryuzanpaku you always see how Kenichi is training, but he never sees how you train and he thinks that's unfair. Myo-san. Kenichi whined, not wanting to sound so shifty, especially about someone that was supposed to be his friend. "I didn't want him to actually know that." "You're right, that is unfair." Hearing Naruto actually admit that was a surprise to Kenichi, but then he turned around with an infuriating grin on his face. "But it's kind of my job to not be fair. I'm definitely not losing no matter what." He then turned back forward again. "I'm not even going home today, so I don't know why you're following me." "Are you going to Ryuzanpaku today?" Mio asked, bounding up next to Naruto with her arms behind her back since they were apparently no longer trailing him to his house. "You haven't seen how Kenichi is getting better at the techniques all of the masters are teaching him." Naruto shook his head and threw his arms up behind the back of his neck, squinting at the sun before pulling his goggles down over his eyes. "Nah. I figure if we have a problem that's not going to stop until we're beaten to a pulp or win completely, I might as well do something about it in the meantime. So, I'm going to go find these Ragnarok people and check them out. The only one I actually know anything about is Valkyrie, because she's supposed to go to our school." Unlike Kenichi, who was relatively new to the fighting scene, Naruto had always had to deal with the prospect of people figuring out he was a ninja. So, when they entered high school to keep real fighters at arm's length, he kept his ear to the ground and figured out enough to avoid it, which had been pretty easy since rumors spread all of the time. It was working until Kenichi stepped on some toes. "You're actually going to look for these people?" Kenichi asked in disbelief. But, they're supposed to be the strongest gang in town." "Look, if the only time you're gonna train full-time is on weekends, that's fine, but it's not enough if you want this to go away anytime soon." Naruto defended. "I really don't like having to walk around looking over my shoulder, so I'm going to start kicking some ass, because I'm a problem solver." "I solve problems. This isn't solving the problem. How is getting rid of someone trying to maim us not solving the problem?" And this was what Naruto had been afraid of. The moment Kenichi found out that Naruto was a ninja, their points of view would begin to clash. Kenichi was a straightforward kind of guy that liked things direct and with the clearest option ahead of him. Naruto did too, but their most clear option scenarios differed. If Kenichi was going to fight, it was going to be head-to-head. If Naruto was going to fight, that wasn't going to be his first choice. But he was being forced into action. He'd never be able to focus on Ryuzanpaku with great fighters his age in the exact same town, trying to take his head. It was too big a distraction. "Kenichi, come on. I don't have time to sit around and wait." Ducking and dodging through the halls? Detours home? How long do you want that to happen for? How long do you think it's going to take for me to get strong enough to fight these guys? Kenichi asked, feeling a bit of offense at the comment. "I don't know. And that's the problem." Naruto finally exploded, pacing around and waving his arms about indignantly. "Look, I can't sit back and worry about my mission if I've got bad guys trying to fry me. And I can't just sit still on defense. I've got to do something. Even if it's just to see what we're up against." Kenichi definitely didn't like that, and Myo could see it in his eyes, moving between the two to keep anything drastic from happening just in case. She had made Naruto mad before, and he was notoriously hot-headed. If he wasn't hiding, he was a ninja any longer, this could wind up coming to blows. Neither of them was right, but neither of them was wrong either, as it was all a matter of preference and opinion. And as stubborn as Naruto was, he didn't want to wait for them to come to him, forcing him to react. They'd already had to deal with that, as they were still dodging Valkyrie's three-man army so that Kenichi could learn some more technique. As he couldn't confidently take on real martial artists, and that's who they would be dealing with. Naruto could. And instead of waiting for them to attack him or Kenichi, he was going to get the ball rolling and pop them in the mouth first. But this was only making for a bad situation. Myo seemed nearly desperate to stop her two friends from fighting each other in the street. Both of them would rather win their way than just win. And in this case those ways were grossly different. I'll tell you what, Naruto eventually said before he stomped off and continued on his own way, choosing to stubbornly separate for the day. If that was how it was going to be, I'll listen to you and do what you say the second you can beat me and make. Until then, if you're not with me, keep on training. Kenichi looked at Naruto's departing back heatedly until he vanished from sight, but even then, he couldn't let it go. Did Naruto ever really believe that I could ever be strong enough to protect my loved ones? To be honest, hearing that Naruto didn't think he could handle the situation hurt. He always said that you could do anything if you tried hard enough. He preached that. But how much of a believer could a guy that was a self-professed awesome ninja really be? Naruto had never been bullied or beaten up. Now he knew that he always used his ninja stuff to somehow get out of it. I hope he's careful, Myo said, looking off in the direction where Naruto had stormed off in with a worried expression. And hearing her say that ripped at Kenichi's heart. The girl that had been a significant portion of the reason that he did this, that he believed he could be stronger to protect, was showing a big level of concern for the guy that he had just been arguing for. Does she think he's right? He thought to himself before shaking his head. Who cares? He said before beginning to walk off to the Ryuzanpaku dojo for his weekend training stretch. What do you mean, Kenichi? You don't really want something bad to happen, do you? The thought of someone as kind as Kenichi holding that kind of a grudge for a friend, their friend in Naruto, made her stomach twist up. At that he relented a bit. No, but how could he say that? I mean, it sounded like he was making fun of me only training on the weekend. Understanding, Myo grabbed Kenichi's hand, much to his confusion and embarrassment at being so close to the gorgeous girl as she started leading them to Ryuzanpaku. Do you remember what Naruto-kun told you about his ninja training? Not really. Naruto didn't really go over what actually went into his training exercises. He kept those in close. Even so, Myo wasn't referring to how he trained, she was referring to the circumstances of his training. He was kept away from his family for years, isolated just so that he could learn ninjutsu. He's not someone that lived and then decided to take up martial arts. He was basically born into it. He even said his parents were ninjas. She wondered what kind of people they were, and if they'd ever meet them. My point is dash. Myo continued, I think that's his own way to try and say that this isn't the kind of thing that you can just dip your toes into. And he's kind of right. If you want to be as strong as you say you want to be, you have to be willing to commit yourself to it entirely despite the hardships. It's a way of life. But what hardships does he go through? Kenichi asked, his training? Or what? Because I've never seen him sweat, possibly getting beaten up before. Think about this. He's been trying to raid the dojo for years. You've been training with the masters, so what do you think they've done to him to stop him? In the past few weeks, Kenichi had been tormented by the insanely intense physical conditioning of Akasane before he'd learned a single jujitsu move recently. He had been forced into ridiculous stretching exercises and posture exercises to get those things up to par for Chinese Kenpo moves from Kensei. Apachai wanted to teach him Muay Thai, but everyone kept saying that he'd kill him trying to demonstrate techniques. Kill him just trying to teach him the basic Muay Thai techniques? Sakaki, all things considered, was the easiest teacher. He never would have figured that from looking at him. And Shigeru carried all sorts of sharp metal weapons and could use them flawlessly. Enough said. Good God, no wonder he didn't seem scared of dealing with delinquents. With Naruto, I really screwed that one up. Naruto said to himself as he walked down the sidewalk alone, why can't I stop sticking my foot in my mouth? There was probably a way better way. He could have said that handling things Kenichi's way would be hard until he got stronger. This wasn't the time for something like this. It was just the three of them against potentially an entire gang, and now he'd broken off from them due to his own stupid temper. Myo was there and Myo was worth 50 Kenichis at once, so it wasn't that he was worried for now. Maybe he should stay away from Ryuzanpaku for a bit, and he didn't just mean in trying to steal those swords from it. Wait, quiet reflection time had to end because people were walking down the street his way and they seemed rather organized, and carrying pipes, kendo sticks, chains, and brass knuckles. Crap! Leading the way was a young man his height with short dark hair, a long earring in his left ear, and a red headband. He wore a white shirt and a sleeveless open blue shirt over it along with blue shorts and sneakers. Well, I heard that the new ninja on the block had a bit of a tiff with his boyfriend. He said in an extremely carefree way for someone about to get into a fight, I guess this is as good a time as any to get some brownie points. But he had a reason. This was one of the strongest freshmen and students in the school period, not counting Naruto himself in his own humble opinion. In other words, this was a pretty tough kid. Koga the kicker. Naruto said in acknowledgement of the boy's presence, getting away from him for the trouble. I'm really not in the mood for this right now. Peddle your bullshit somewhere else and save it for later. If you're not here to take me to Valkyrie, FCK off. I'm just curious. Koga said, as his fellow thugs started to spread out a bar off the street in front of Naruto. I'm wondering how someone can play at being weakling for that long, then smoke someone like Tsukuba, so just chill. I'll bring you to Valkyrie-sama, but not before I kick the dye out of your hair. You don't want a piece of me today. Naruto said, glaring at him through his goggles, last chance. We've got all eyes on you. Koga said, gesturing to every single gang member spread out to keep watch of him. Tsukuba stooged how you beat him at school before we kicked him out. You're not going to be disappearing on us without someone seeing you. So, I can take my time with you. I'm not taking my time with you. Naruto said, deciding that now was the time he'd actually have to prepare for an actual encounter. Sliding his left leg forward to turn his body to the side, Naruto extended his left arm in a fist and his right stayed close and in front of his face. Index and middle fingers held up in what looked like a hand seal. I'm gonna make you look stupid. Last chance. That actually got the surrounding street punks to start laughing at him openly. I'd say you look stupid enough for everyone here. Is that stance for real? Oh, check him out, he's serious. Without saying anything, Naruto's right arm darted behind him into one of the pockets on his bag and quickly lashed back out, throwing something at four of the thugs that hit them in the chest and put them on their backs in one move. What the hell was that? Sticking out of their chests were metal discs with sharpened tips. One for each groove of Naruto's finger to hold them in. Placing his left hand back in the half-ram seal that he started from, Naruto smirked at the sounds of disbelief and shock that he actually threw shuriken. Yeah, I'm serious. You actually use weapons? Koga asked, feeling a bead of sweat roll down his brow at the sight of 5 guys going down in one move. You killed them. I can't kill someone with a shuriken to the chest, you dumbass. Naruto shouted back in return, I just threw hard enough to black them out. And everyone else is carrying a weapon but you, so shut the hell up. That was right. Koga thought to himself the fact that the others carried weapons because without them they were pathetic. And here was this kid carrying weapons too. Weird weapons that actually took some skill to use, but weapons nonetheless. Ha! Real fighters don't need trick weapons to win. Koga said, deciding to move in. The closer he was, the less a chance Naruto would try to throw any shuriken since missing would lead to a fatal defeat. Let's see what you've really got. Naruto didn't reach into his bag for more shuriken, instead keeping his left up and his right out. Koga threw his first kick and Naruto sprang back way out of the distance of his reach as the leg swung around. Well, if his nickname wasn't a dead giveaway. Koga was confused by Naruto putting so much distance between them, but figured it was out of fear from the haymaker equivalent of a kick he'd launched at his head to test his defense. People that dodge like that really don't know how to defend. With that he rushed forward again and figured that an overwhelming attack would be what would quickly break Naruto, and that was what he liked anyway. You've got to move forward to attack. Naruto anticipated him once again and figured he wasn't going to try the same bullheaded thing twice, and he was right, as Koga's first move was to throw a quick rising uppercut of a kick meant to land under his chin. He twisted to the side after he missed and shoved a side kick that again missed as Naruto moved to the side of the maneuver. This was starting to piss the gang member off. He threw another kick that was aimed at Naruto's midsection and looked like it was going to hit. But it only wound up with him banging his shin off of Naruto's knee and taking multiple rapid short-handed jabs to the face in return. The quick burst of punches threw off his balance, and Naruto further disrupted his stance by sticking his own foot beneath one of Koga's before it touched the ground. From there Naruto simply dropped his center of gravity and used both of his hands in a forceful shove under the chin that landed as hard as a palm strike. Falling on his backside and almost biting his tongue, Koga seethed and quickly jumped back up to come kicking at Naruto some more, the speed and tempo of his pace picking up as he did so. And Naruto kept moving away, but each time his toes touched the ground from springing just out of range he'd leap back and just as fast before another kick could be rechambered. Each missed kick came at the cost of Naruto landing repeated short, concise, stinging jabs and short punches with his left hand as he circled around Koga non-stop, keeping him from getting back in front of Naruto to square up his aim. It sucked because each punch was aimed at the exact same spot, just above his eyebrow until it split the skin and started bleeding. Koga immediately squinted through his left eye that blood dripped down into as he kept missing his faster left-legged kicks from Naruto continuing to move that way faster than he can throw them. He couldn't see, and Naruto was fast enough to hit him on the move without falling prey to his own speed attacks. Alright, I gotcha. Koga thought to himself before going for a jumping spin kick as Naruto's body was moving in the direction of his power leg. He was moving right for a kick coming from that side, and there'd be no way to stop his progressive movement. But when his body swung through with the kick he realized that he'd hit nothing but air. It was like Naruto had basically slid around him, moving the opposite direction that he'd spun in. How'd he move? There would have been no time to even duck that. It was bullshit. He could swear he was hitting Naruto with everything, but his attacks seemed to miss miserably every single time. The last time it was like Naruto blurred through the kick itself and rematerialized after it passed through him. In reality, Naruto had merely moved back just enough to dodge the toes of Koga's move before replacing himself right back in the original spot. It was simply bouncing back on the toes of his front leg and bouncing forward on the heel of his back leg. But it looked like he hadn't moved since it was such a simple and small movement that didn't disturb the rest of his body. And once again, Naruto had backed off out of reach of any of his kicks and striking range entirely. Is that Taekwondo? For a kicker, your footwork is terrible if your target doesn't try to stand off with you. Why do you keep moving away? You're never going to counterattack with any decent force like that. Koga shouted at him, getting sick of Naruto repeatedly keeping away from him. He wasn't even trying to stay close enough to try anything once he missed. This baby scratch doesn't hurt. Is that all you've got? He pointed at the blood above his eye for emphasis. That's not how I fight. Naruto said, standing in his normal stance. You don't know anything about ninjutsu, do you? The point to how I fight isn't to get close enough to wail on you. Koga began to run forward to get into position for assaulting Naruto again, but the first step forward he wound up taking had already seen Naruto take 4, and before he took his second step, his head had snapped back and his body flew through the air from a jumping knee kick that slammed off of his chin. Tadayudu, straight feint. The entire point of Naruto's hand-to-hand was speed and movement, to constantly dart in and out of an enemy's reach and work accordingly before they could react. It was meant to cause havoc amongst packs of enemies and force them into a panic. When going one-on-one, it was meant to pick at a difficult enemy to slow them down with cumulative damage and disrupt their rhythm before backing off and garnering the distance to either draw weapons, or to deliver more crushing strikes once he'd established a definite speed advantage throughout the battle. His more devastating single attacks usually came from dashing in, and when approaching an attentive enemy, especially head-on, that was dangerous. But no one covered distance in the least amount of moves than Uzumaki Naruto. That was what the feint branch of techniques were for. They were supplementary, to misdirect the course of his movements and force the opponent into mistiming their own retaliation attacks. The straight feint was the most direct bread-and-butter approach for his attack movements that was as easy as breathing for him by this point. It was a simple footwork trick of the eye meant to fool the opponent into thinking that they had managed to get the first step on him. If the opponent thought that he was off, they would move to attack, and the moment they did, Naruto would theoretically be at least 2 steps ahead of them to speed ahead and deliver a heavy blow. The technique wasn't about the attack itself, as he could do literally anything he wanted after he made sure his stride had priority over theirs. It was about the method of movement he used. And the straight feint was the most basic of them all. He actually could have ended that a lot sooner. He could have hit Koga way harder and way faster than the pitter-patter jabs he'd been using. With all of the punches that he landed, he actually could have knocked Koga out any time he wanted after he'd dodged the first few kicks. But he needed the practice against a different opponent and he needed a source to vent on after his little argument with Kenichi. Koga volunteered for all of those jobs by trying his luck against him. Despite being there for 4 years, he hadn't fought a diverse amount of enemies. He tried to fly under the radar and only fought when he knew he'd get away with it, so he didn't really get many tough and well-trained adversaries. It had been a long time since he'd had a real fight with someone that wasn't Myo, and while they were intense, they weren't as often as he'd needed to keep himself sharp with most of his moves in combat situations. Shikamaru didn't spar at all anymore, so Naruto had to waste entire Ryuzanpaku raids sometimes just as an excuse to train against Myo when he knew she'd wind up confronting him. Once Koga went out, the remaining 2 gangsters that weren't knocked by Naruto's previous actions ran away. From their point of view, what they'd seen of the final sequence was Koga beginning to run. But before he could even lean forward to pick up speed, it looked like he'd bent forward into a projectile being shot into his face with a slingshot. "Oi, where are you going? You're all done?" Naruto shouted as the remnants of the thugs left. "Well, you can keep the shuriken at least. Ain't I a nice guy?" This wasn't a good thing though, despite it being easy enough for him to win without an offensive technique. Even though Naruto hadn't been touched, the entire reason for his moves was to never be touched. But even so, Koga was trained. Not well, but he had actual martial arts talent and experience. And if he was just a grunt and took his orders without a question from Valkyrie, just how skilled a martial artist would that make that person? Reaching into Koga's pocket, Naruto pulled out a cell phone and immediately went to his contacts. Lazy ass doesn't lock his phone. And he even had his boss's number in there under the name Valkyrie. A number that Naruto proceeded to dial, because why would he care? It wasn't his phone. "Koga, get your ass back to the base. You and your group are the stragglers." "Oh, it's a girl." Well duh, he should have figured with the whole Valkyrie thing. Norse mythology wasn't his thing though. "You'd better have something useful for me for being so damn late." "Yeah, this isn't Koga," Naruto said. On a random whim that he would later attribute to his bad mood, he opened his mouth without even trying to mimic Koga to get some information. He needed a stress reliever. This is the guy that just need Koga's face flat. "Nice to finally talk to the bitch that put a hit out on me and my buddy." It seemed like Valkyrie didn't know how to respond to such a brazen statement at first, before she found her words. Apparently Shirahama doesn't have the kind of personality to say any of that to anyone, so I'm guessing this is Uzumaki. "You're supposed to be the loudmouth." "Yeah, I just wanted to call and say that I'm not really a fan of slowkicker Koga trying to bring a lynch mob to get me." Naruto continued to talk as he walked down the street on the way home. "If that's the best you've got, you'd better just call this whole thing off." He heard her laughing over the phone at his apparent threat. "Are you calling out one of the 8 fists of Ragnarok? You're kidding, right? Someone's been putting fertilizer on their balls." "Well, unless you have any better mooks to throw at me, you'd better do it yourself, because quantity over quality ain't gonna work here." "Oh." She sighed before letting out one last laugh. "This is good. I'm glad you have a backbone, or at least sound like you do without all of the rara hero crap. The way you and Shirahama have been ducking and dodging, I figured you two to be cowards." "No, we pick our spots. Like after Kenichi learned more offensive techniques to actually fight with. Until then, bluffing and a show of force would have to do for the time being. Anyway, I just wanted to call and say, whoever you are, I'm thinking of you." "Oh, really now? How sweet dash. Thinking about all of the ways I'm going to kick your ass. I'm going to break your neck when I finally find whatever rock you too pathetic dash." "Cool story, bro." With that, Naruto hung up the phone with the push of a button and thoughtfully held onto it for a few moments. He felt so much better now. It was amazing how well running your mouth over a decently long distance could help you vent. That wasn't the best idea he'd ever had though, but at least now she actually had a kind of decent reason to target him instead of just for shits and giggles. And if it was going to be him being targeted, it was obviously going to include someone else too. He thought about that before he proceeded to use the borrowed phone to call Ryuzanpaku's number, because he was not going to be using his own phone for that. "Yes? Ryuzanpaku Dojo. Koetsuji Akasame speaking. Hey, this is Naruto, and this isn't my phone by the way. I just wanted to ask before Kenichi and Myo get there, are you guys teaching Kenichi more techniques than the ones I saw last week yet?" "Why yes. Actually, Kenichi has been starting on his second round of techniques with Kensei, Sakaki, and I for around 8 days now. I do not think it would be the best idea for Apachai to do so just yet." "Why do you ask, Naruto-san?" Really now?" So, things weren't really particularly bleak, just not looking very bright. Well, I kind of wrote a check with my mouth to the Ragnarok Valkyrie chick that I can cash. But he really won't be able to if she's as tough as we think, especially since she's a girl and he's chivalrous. Admitting something like that to the apparent smartest person he knew was extremely embarrassing. He was certain that the Ryuzanpaku masters already saw him as substituting most of his real-world common-sense brains for guts and caginess, but this was just something else entirely. Akasame either wasn't surprised, or didn't care about that from the way he responded, as evenly pleasant as ever. Oh, well, I guess I'll have to use one of my new machines to speed up his physical training so that we have more time for techniques. Thank you for telling us that. By the way, does Kenichi have a family history of heart or lung issues, thinning blood, or any other standing internal ailment that you can think of? That sounded sketchy. What kind of friend would Naruto be if he didn't ask? Why? For the training, of course. What are you doing to him when I'm not there? Making progress. No, he doesn't. Naruto eventually said quietly. He felt like he should have been playing a funeral march for his best friend, disagreement or not. Thank you for that information. Come by again soon. Click. Am I a bad person for leaving him with those guys? Naruto thought to himself before throwing Koga's phone over his shoulder. But who else could make a fighter out of him as quickly as they needed it done? He'd be fine. Myo wouldn't let him die. Probably. Whatever. Kenichi was the one that wanted to go in the first place, he just showed him there. Oh, he felt terrible about that. Those people were monsters. And now he needed to find out about Ragnarok and hope that Kenichi got good enough to do more than hold his own, win, and soon. This was getting out of hand. Ninja. Oh God, not him. Naijima had been watching that somehow, hadn't he? I think I've got some information for you that you might want if you're really going to take on Ragnarok instead of leaving town. Elsewhere within a somewhat dilapidated apartment building, sitting on a single sofa, Valkyrie just stared at the phone in her hand in shock. Did that really just happen? And slowly, as the course of her last phone conversation set in, a low growl emanated from her throat. All of the bodyguards in the nearby vicinity proceeded to back up just in case. She didn't exactly have the best temper when upset. She smashed the phone onto the hard floor and smashed it with an axe kick, along with the tile beneath it. The user of the kick was a lithe, slender teenage girl with short, unkempt red hair underneath a green beret. Her clothing of choice was a short t-shirt with a wide collar that revealed the straps of an A-shirt underneath it. Her jeans were tight and frayed on one leg while the other lacked a leg entirely on the right side, exposing her skin up past the thigh. Who the hell are these Shirahama and Uzumaki guys? Valkyrie said to herself as two others came into the room. Who are they? Where do come from? The first man said as he entered. He was a handsome fellow who had rather tan skin and long silver hair held in a ponytail. Very easygoing looking, he wore the blue uniform of the school with one of his hands casually shoved in one of his pockets and his free hand wrapped up to the wrist in bandages. This I do not know. The second high school student was a bit taller and more muscular in appearance with frosted brown hair spiking up. He had a scar under the side of his chin and sunglasses on his face and wore a white short-sleeved dress shirt and blue pants, the casual school uniform for Koryo High School. Koga got beaten? I'd have loved to have seen that. The bastard never takes anything seriously. Koga is a jackass. Valkyrie said, grinding the parts of the phone she'd crushed beneath her boot before she plopped back down on her couch, leaning against the armrest comfortably, legs crossed and leaning over the other. Can't even handle a loudmouthed fake ninja. Seriously, one had just apparently come up as an upstart fighter, being seen as a complete wimp beforehand, and the other just out of the blue destroys one of the lower-level directors of the gang and then one of her technique trio, the remainder of which now stood in front of her. Takeda Iki and Kozo Yukita respectively. Takeda shrugged with his free arm in response to Valkyrie's statement, how do you know he's fake? He'd heard the rumors that had been spread recently just like everyone else, and had heard Tsukaba's accounts of how he never saw the thrashing he had taken coming. Who's to say he's not real? Come on, Takeda. Yukita said with a chuckle, have you ever actually tried looking for any school in Japan that claimed to teach ninjutsu? It's a joke. If it's a joke. Valkyrie said, tilting her beret down over her eyes, the only part about it that'll make me laugh is when we find him and crush him. The loudmouth shit was going to get his very, very soon. No one took their jabs at Ragnarok and got away with it. They had an actual gang war to get ready for. The Eight Fists had to gain bodies to throw at the real future problem that would be coming their way for the leaders that were actually talented and had the potential to be absurdly powerful martial artists. Getting sidetracked dealing with two mystery upstarts wasn't what was needed in her neck of the gang. Yes. She could laugh at the little joke all she wanted after she heard the news that Uzumaki and Shirahama as well as the little strumpet that apparently hung around with them were all pulverized. That was the only punchline to that joke she wanted to hear. Chapter 4, Conflict Builds Character. Naijima, I swear to God. This better be worth every minute I've been here. Naruto said, sitting at a table in a small restaurant across from someone that had been trying to bust out his secret of being a ninja for the better part of the last year. Now what were you saying about Ragnarok? Naijima Haruo just rubbed his hands together in what he thought was out of eyeshot and turned back around acting normal. Patience, my friend. Are you enjoying your dinner? It's great. And it was, but I came here for a reason, you know. He could swear he saw a pair of antennae spring up from the dark bowl cut of Naijima as they conversed. First tell me. What's your motivation for even being a ninja? A dark vendetta against those that wronged your clan? A taste for battle that can only be quenched from the shadows? What? Damn mangas and animes. Did they really give off that impression for the rest of the world to take from them? Maybe if a real high-level ninja was willing to give an interview or something, that notion could be dispelled, but pigs would probably fly first. Naruto had to sigh before looking down at his hands. I want to be the best ninja in the entire world. A long time ago I made a promise to my parents that I would, and that nothing that ever happened to me, for better or for worse, would ever change that. I promised I'd never let it change who I was or take away the kind of person that they taught me to be. That's why I'm a ninja. Because I want them to be proud of me. Naijima's next question would have been about his parents to state his curiosity, but there was a blank look in Naruto's eyes as he spoke. There was something painful there, and he didn't want his new instrument to his eventual world domination to walk out of the door due to being offended. Instead, Naijima grinned and held up 8 fingers. Valkyrie is just the tip of the iceberg. Even if you defeat her, there are 7 more after her. Thor, Hermit, Siegfried, Loki, Freya, Berserker, and Odin. 8 of the strongest fighters in the city. How long do you think you can survive before they get you? Naruto just smirked as if he were being challenged and he was supposed to be scared or something. Okay, maybe this crazy bastard wasn't the kind of person he was going to be able to get to by scaring him. At least not with this. There was something though. A weak point in the armor, as it were. What about stupid Kenichi then? That was something else entirely. He was training, but could he get ready to fight at that level fast enough? With a sigh, Naruto set his arms on the table. Ugh, with some time. He needs time. He can definitely do it. I know he can. But he just needs a little time. A month or 2 at the rate he's being tortured trained, and he can definitely do it considering who's training him. And what about you? Naijima prodded. You're fine with the situation? Anything I can do to help you, buddy? This was to be the ground level of what would eventually be his enterprise that would take over the world. The golden geese were not to be killed. Naruto was going to open his mouth to speak again before he realized that nothing Naijima had ever done had been solely for anyone else's benefit. This entire setup was odd, but because Naruto really had nothing concrete of Ragnarok, he didn't want to let a possible contact that could know something about them slip from his grasp. But trying to manipulate Naijima into coughing up something without indirectly giving the alien boy something just as important from his own point of view in return was risky business. In other words, while he was damn certain that he was the bigger snake in this pit, he didn't want a snake with stronger venom to get a bite in on him. Right now, he just needed to get into shape to fight at any time. And he'd be playing his cards as close to the vest as he could. He'd bluff for Kenichi for as long as he could, and try to back up those threats with appropriate action to mask the whole thing until he didn't have to any longer. You want to help? Naruto asked rather cryptically. He needed something good. Something good enough to get Naijima off of his back to make him think he was playing ball, but something that would keep him from playing into Naijima's hands too much for whatever he really wanted from him. I'll tell you what. Give me your number, and every time I do something to Ragnarok I'll send you a picture or a video. It was quite obvious that he didn't expect Naruto to do anything like that in the least, judging from how he started choking on his beverage and spit it out after hearing it. Why you would do that? Whatever you want out of it, you want me and Kenichi to fight Ragnarok. Naruto figured with a shrug. Well, I'm going to see if I can take the fight to them anyway. But I'm going to need a little goodwill from you here, because it's hard to believe that you want to help us out of the goodness of your heart. You know, Koga showed up pretty quickly after I left Kenichi and Myo. I don't even think the echoes from our yells had faded from the air yet. One of Nijima's pointed ears involuntarily twitched out of nerves. Ha ha ha, what are you saying? Why would I spread information about your argument on purpose so that Ragnarok would pick up on your trail? I didn't say that. You did. Naruto said, feigning seriousness that was just beyond what was real. He wanted to laugh since he had Nijima hook, line, and sinker. The most important part of all of this was the walking away, which was what he did, picking up his backpack and leaving. He didn't want to leave such a good bowl of ramen behind, since that restaurant had a mean ramen, but this had to work. Come on, Nijima. You had that brain in PDA full of random info. Give him something good from it so that he didn't leave. Valkyrie's name is Nanju Kazara. Taekwondo user. Interesting. Naruto said in a sarcastic deadpan while walking to the front door. Nijima got up to follow him out since he knew if Naruto got outside without him being there he'd disappear. The way he scrambled over his own chair and paid for his own food and Naruto's without waiting for change after dropping twice the needed amount almost got Naruto to laugh, but he needed his poker face on. He needed something better than that. He could have figured that out himself with a little digging beyond the surface. Hell, he could have figured that out the next day in school if he wanted to. A good contact didn't tell him things that he could find out without any help. He needed something special. Something only Nijima could get for him. I've got stats on Ikki Takeda and Kozo Yukita, the puncher and the thrower of the skill trio. Divisional underlings from our school? Now you're definitely insulting me. He could have gotten that too. Nijima needed to bring his A game or this conversation was going to be over. Please wait. Hear me out. Naruto reached for the door and Nijima desperately dove for him to keep him from leaving, eyes closed desperately in his effort to keep a linchpin of his endeavors from falling out of the slot. Ha! Success! He got a hold of him right around the body. Eek! Man, Naruto screamed like a girl when he was caught, and was pretty shapely for a guy, and had boobs that his head was currently pushing up against. Well, that wasn't anatomically correct at all. What does that creep think he's doing to Hibiki? Get him off. Opening his eyes and looking up, Nijima found himself holding onto an older girl with curly blonde hair wearing a zip-up top in white and a soft pastel blue with a skirt in the same kind of color blue. Just outside of the restaurant there were 7 more girls wearing a similar outfit with some having their extra color to their outfit being soft pink, soft blue, or one that stood out as a soft yellow. None of them looked happy, and all of them were branching weapons like nunchucks, a whip, a flail, a chain with a weight on the end, a pair of tessen, a pair of sai, a bow staff, tonfa, and did that one has a spear? Nijima didn't even bother trying to beg off and apologize. Girls with weapons? That would have just been wasted breath. Instead, he quickly turned to run through the back of the restaurant in order to escape certain death. Where did Naruto go? Don't let him get away with that. Valkyries, kill that groping demon. From outside, Naruto stood across the street leaning against a streetlight as he proceeded to watch all 8 of those weapon-wielding girls go in and pursue Nijima. Damn the costs. He'd get away. If Nijima was going to get his ass kicked for something that he did to piss someone off, it would have happened already. That guy was tops at running away. It was his fault. Naruto said under his breath to himself as he started to walk away with his arms thrown up behind his head relaxingly. He tried to grab me from behind. So, I substituted with something. He couldn't help his reflexes. When people tried to grab him, he'd replace himself with the closest thing nearby similar in size, blame Ryuzanpaku's masters. So, either this would tell Nijima to stop holding out on him or he'd just keep doing that each time he tried to pawn crap information onto him, or it would get Nijima to go out and get some real intel if he actually wanted something from Naruto badly enough. Carrot and stick. This time around those Valkyrie chicks were the stick. And spear. And lots of other weapons. Wait, that was a gang of older girls called Valkyries? He thought there was only one. This was making his head hurt. Why didn't Nijima tell him that instead of all of the other stuff that he either already knew or could have figured out in 5 minutes in the hallway tomorrow at school? Ugh, he was not going back to deal with that tonight. As he walked down the street he turned back to the restaurant across the road and saw one lone girl outside staring at him in return, getting him to stop and return fire so to speak. She wasn't really glaring at him, but she was giving him a straightforward and stern enough look to rub him the wrong way. He didn't like being sized up, but that was counteracted by the fact that she was very pretty. Exotic almost, with her darker toned skin. She had short, messy brown hair and a thin scar running across her left cheek, and her body was rather curvaceous and toned from what he could see through her clothes. She had an eye-like pendant around her neck and wore a blue spandex pants and a tight light blue sleeveless shirt underneath an open orange jacket. She got extra points for the color of the jacket because it was great, and because she was a hot older woman. But the lack of any discernible expression on her face didn't really sit well with him. Naruto freed one hand from behind his neck and waved at her across the street with a grin on his face before turning back around and starting to head home. The girl just continued to stare at him as he walked away until the rest of the Valkyries came up behind her looking quite upset at some sort of misfortune. We couldn't catch that weird, handsy high school guy that groped Hibiki-chan. He was really fast. By then they noticed that their apparent leader was staring at something that was already gone. Freya-sama, what's the matter? The newly identified Freya turned to her underlings and pointed to the door of the restaurant where the incident had started. Do you know that you just let Kizara's target walk right past you? He used you for a misdirection trick on the boy that you chased away. They looked shocked and then a bit enraged at that new revelation. I'm aware that it's a divisional Ragnarok problem instead of a group-wide one, but you girls should be more attentive. Yes, Freya-sama. They all said together with varying degrees of embarrassment at being gently admonished by one of the 8 fists of Ragnarok in charge of them. As they all went back inside to try and settle the scene down and get the meal that they had originally come there to get in the first place, Freya had to think to herself, I didn't even notice him coax Hibiki-chan into his old position. How smooth was that? The only reason she knew what he'd done to begin with and didn't fall for the same ploy as the rest of the Valkyries was because she'd been the farthest away and had the best view of him walking away like nothing had happened. The others didn't even know that he was there, if they'd even be able to recognize him on sight at all. He was rather nondescript. Hibiki had been the one to open the door and she still didn't notice him move right past her. They had gone through the exit at the exact same time. Admittedly, Freya didn't even notice what he'd done to somehow guide her underling into his old spot without alerting anyone else. As she led the way back into the restaurant and raised her hand to open the door, she revealed a black glove on her hand with the Roman numeral for 3 on the back of it. Interesting. The next day, Ryuzanpaku Dojo. Progress was steady. Not really. Progress was really rushed. By the standards of anyone. Again. Sakaki said as he stood arms crossed, sternly watching Kenichi go through the techniques that he was teaching him. He had to pick and choose wisely what he was trying to give him to learn because apparently all of the masters with the exception of Shigeru and Hayato wanted their bit of time to teach him something. He'd learned several moves from multiple styles, and even though they weren't that complex, they didn't have to be. The sheer versatility of having beginner moves from 3 different styles of fighting with markedly different principles behind them would make him a threat to any intermediate in one single style. Karate, Jiu-Jitsu, Chinese Kenpo, and Muay Thai. Though all he really knew in that regard was the stance and how to move in it. No one felt it was safe enough for him to learn more in that one. Once everyone figured that Apachai wouldn't kill him trying to teach Muay Thai or beat him senseless every time they hit pads, he'd really have 4 styles that he'd know the beginning aspects of. Kenichi stood in front of Sakaki in his base karate stance before lunging forward with his left foot at his current teacher with a stiff starter punch, but Sakaki just blocked it easily. He still smiled though, as he felt the punch aimed at his midsection land solidly. Good use of Yamazaki. Remember to conceal that second punch for when your opponent blocks. They'll normally leave their body open if they believe they'll be hit in the face. Backing off with a look of some accomplishment on his face, Kenichi wiped his brow and made sure that the band-aid under his eye hadn't come off from his sweating yet. He stood at the ready awaiting his next exercise, but before Sakaki could say anything he was interrupted. That's all the time you get for today with Kenichi. Kensei said as he walked out into the field, hands hidden by his sleeves behind his back as Sakaki glared at him. You know the drill by now. Don't pout. I don't pout. Sakaki said before looking at Kenichi one last time and patting him on the shoulder. Just remember to keep drilling the moves you've learned until you can do them without having to think. That's the only way you truly become a powerful martial artist, when things like this become second nature. That's good advice. Kensei pointed out before smirking. His teacher should probably be the one giving him advice during his turn with him though. Tough shit. I'll tell him what I want. While his 2 masters began to bicker, Kenichi chose to take a momentary rest on the wooden exterior floor of the dojo where Mio had been sitting and watching. Everyone seems really excited to teach you, Kenichi, she said as he took a load off for just a moment. Have you ever thought of training here full-time? He had thought about it. It had been on his mind ever since Naruto had gone off on his own the evening before. And it still stuck in the back of his head. Do you really think I should? Well, it really depends on how far into this you want to go. Mio said, trying to be helpful and smile. The stronger you want to be, the more time you'll have to devote to your training. And if I wanted to be as strong as Naruto, or you? Mio put a lot of thought into that question. She didn't know quite how long that would take, but she knew one thing for sure. No matter what he was doing now wouldn't be enough to catch up in 100 years, since regular fighters only train a few hours a day, if that, the way you do now. If you ever wanted to catch up, you'd have to live here 24 hours a day for the sake of your training. What? He was already training every single day during evenings, but 24 hours a day? He'd have to move out of his home? Away from his family? He would literally have to breathe, eat, and sleep martial arts non-stop. I don't have time to sit around and wait. If he didn't, he would never become strong enough to start catching up or measuring up to Mio, who seemed so strong every time she ever demonstrated any skill in front of him, and Naruto, who didn't need to wait and hide from anyone. Kenichi knew his character, and knew that the wait-and-see approach with Naruto was highly unpopular. Do you think I should? Kenichi eventually asked, drawing a confused look from the delightful blonde girl. Live here to train, I mean. I'll still be going to school, and I won't be that far away from my family. But it was too big of a decision to make right now. He'd been training for a little over a month and a half. Mio just put a hand on his arm once she heard him fretting, and that stopped him cold. Geez, why was her smile so disarming? It just wasn't fair. I think Kenichi is brave for doing what he's done so far. You can go as far as you want to. I believe in you. Nearby, Kensei and Sakaki had stopped their bickering enough to hear the conversation from Kenichi and Mio. This could be really good, but for now they needed Kenichi to actually fight. Naruto's full-court press approach of going ahead and getting his battles with Ragnarok over with was fine for him, but Kenichi needed some battle experience before they could begin teaching him more. He needed to see what he was capable of, to see what his training could actually do for him, but to do that they needed to guide him into a fight or several, and the only one that was seemingly chomping at the bit to get himself into a scrum was someone that they couldn't really find. At least until now. When Naruto attacked Ryuzanpaku, they never followed him to his home after they knocked him out and threw him out because no one knew when he'd get back up. But now they knew where he went to school, and while he could notice most of them following him easily enough to find a way to lose them or lead them in a circle, there was one person that it was already proven he wasn't an expert at outright detecting. Even then, if they found his house by that manner, it would probably piss him off or scare him more than convince him to play ball. Sakaki. I know. Let's go talk to Shigeru. You go talk to Shigeru. Now's my time to train Kenichi. Damn it. A few days later, with Naruto, evening, it was time to go hunting. Or tracking in this case. It wasn't hard to find Ragnarok chumps outside of the area by Naruto's school. They were in a current mode of trying to recruit people that might have been tough or smashing the ones that decided that they would rather not join. All he had to do was walk around until he found a street fight going on and hide until it was over. That was easy. If he couldn't do that, what kind of ninja was he? But none of them led him to any bosses. They'd just patrol around until late, call in, and never go back to any definite hiding place. So, whoever was giving them their marching orders was decent. So, it was time to go to someone who was smarter than him, way smarter than him, and see what he had to say about it. Knock knock knock. An apartment door opened up to reveal casual black eyes that sighed at the sight of Naruto in the early evening dark. Go away, Naruto. I'm telling you, nothing's changed about that mission. I'm not here for that. Naruto assured him with his hands held up defensively, honest. I promise. Just hear me out, okay? Shikamaru stared at him long and hard for a good while before he eventually moved and went outside, shutting his door behind him. Okay, I'm listening. What do you have? What's going on? Knowing you, it's some kind of troublesome problem. It depends. On what? On what you know about Ragnarok. Shikamaru raised an eyebrow at him and shook his head. Oh man, don't tell me you've heard of these guys too? Naruto's eyes lit up at learning that Shikamaru knew about these people. Yeah, I know a bit about them, but not everything. Not even close. Mostly because I don't care. I know enough to help me stay away from them. And if I was trying to go toward them? Naruto asked, hinting at Shikamaru. People know I'm a ninja at my school now, so now Ragnarok wants a piece of me. But if I beat the boss at my school, that'll just make it worse. Smart man. Well, smarter than Shikamaru had given him credit for in regards to thinking ahead in more than just a fight. And you want me to give you some kind of heads up on what I know so that you can handle business at your school, or at least do it somewhere else to soften the boss at your school up? Naruto nodded and Shikamaru smirked at proving that he was right. Misdirection was Naruto's thing after all. He had a serious penchant for trying to confuse the hell out of whomever he was fighting, even at times like this. Naruto's long-term strategies didn't really go much further than doing whatever he thought was smart that most people would not see coming. At least this was getting him off of that impossible Ryuzanpaku mission. While he was still stirring up trouble, it was better than stirring up trouble that he definitely couldn't handle. He'd rather Naruto fight a gang war against people their age than fight those scary masters. It was by far the lesser of two evils. Alright, give me some time. Shikamaru said, rubbing the back of his head lazily. I hear things just like everybody else, but I need some time to figure out what's real and what's not, so give me a bit. A massive smile spread over Naruto's face as he extended a hand for Shikamaru to shake. Shikamaru rolled his eyes, but he still couldn't help but smile too and shook it. It's good to have you back, Shika. I missed you. Yeah. I figure listening out for stuff I was going to hear anyway is better than a suicide mission. Shikamaru said as he went back into his apartment. I'm not back though. I told you already, I'm done being a ninja. It's too troublesome. After he shut the door, Naruto just let out a sigh and went along his merry way. It was a start. He'd been trying to get Shikamaru actively back into the game for quite some time, so if any silver lining existed around this Ragnarok cloud, it would be a chance to see if he could get his partner back into action. Sometime later, Ryuzanpaku Dojo. Naruto stood in the dojo building in his stance facing off with Neo in their respective stances. Kenichi was watching intently as his best friend and the secret, object of his affection faced off in a tense stare down. Well, it was tense for him. He was basically holding his breath. The master currently in charge of training him and Akasane wanted him to watch two other fighters in the middle of combat so he could soak in the experience of watching a fight for once instead of just being the one caught up in it. He'd been getting in more than a few tiffs with the street-level goons of Ragnarok, a lot more these days. It was confusing Kenichi because he was still following Naruto's direction in how to move around the neighborhood and hide while in school, but in school it seemed like it was the only place he'd definitely be able to duck them. Sometimes it seemed like Naruto would just walk them into a gaggle of thugs on accident and shrug harmlessly at his mistake. Oops. He swore that the masters and his best friend were out to kill him somehow. But Myo was apparently fine with it as it was building his experience. So busy with fighting his own one or two at a time, Kenichi never really got to see what Myo and Naruto did to beat their enemies. But now he had the chance. Myo had a smile on her face, dressed in a kikoji over her usual tight purple outfit, and Naruto was still wearing his clothes from school that day, sand shoes of course, but with backpack on him as always. What was with that thing? He wasn't smiling though, and his eyes were locked right on hers, blue on blue. The thing was, Naruto and Myo hadn't ever sparred before. They'd always just tried to take each other's heads off. So, this was kind of new to the both of them. Myo was excited, and Naruto was too, but he kept thinking that Furinji Hayato would bust through the wall like the Kool-Aid Man and throw him to the horizon the second they started, whether he could gain the upper hand or not. Pavlovian conditioning was a bitch. I think you know what you can and can't do, Naruto-san. Akasane said as he was overseeing the would-be spar. Naruto didn't even let him know he'd heard anything, as both he and Mo were as still as statues, confusing Kenichi. Why haven't they attacked yet? They'd been like that for a while? Akasane just smiled over at his student and held a hand to his chin while he explained. Both of them have fought each other so much that they're used to each other's moves to an extreme degree. When two people are this familiar with each other, one doesn't want to make the mistake of telegraphing a move that the other already knows about to leave themselves open. How intense. And with that, Kenichi found himself hyper-focusing on the two would-be opponents. Whoever made the first move would be at a disadvantage. Mule. Myo's eyes lit up at the sound of the kitten coming from outside before she realized that it was way too convenient for a cute little kitty to be outside. By then though, Naruto had made it to her front left corner of vulnerability and had attempted several fast, Real speed and power punches that she was forced to block before retaliating with a flipping kick and forcing him out of range. That was so mean, Naruto-kun. That sounds real. Ha! You're still a sucker for me throwing my voice? Naruto gloated with a grin as he got as still as a statue once more to await an opening or a chance. At least this time it didn't end up with you in a snare trap. This time Mio would take the initiative, being careful in her approach to attack. If she spooked him prematurely without cornering him, he'd just stay out of her range until the spar time ended. Fighting indoors gave her the advantage. Still though, this was Naruto, and if she wasn't fast in how she moved around he would eat her alive. But if she was too fast to move, he'd still punish her as long as he knew where she was going. Mio's approach had Naruto darting all over the open-door dojo, but one of the rules of the spar was that he could not go outside or get too nasty. Way to tie his hands, not that he didn't have sparring etiquette. She was hitting air, but mostly wanted to see which direction he was partial to moving in. Something that Kenichi found difficult to pay attention to. Each time Mio threw a punch, as she didn't dare kick at Naruto without being certain she'd have a good chance at hitting him, Naruto looked like he'd dodge one way but instead appear right at her side on the other. He had to rub his eyes to make sure his brain wasn't skipping a few frames in this movie. I can't tell how he's going to move, even when I watch his legs. Kenichi pointed out, feeling like the world a treadmill in one direction and Naruto was moving against it in every direction. How can he do that? It's advanced footwork. Many styles have certain steps. For example, boxing has advanced footwork meant to fool opponents as well, but Naruto-san's is rather complicated. How so? He could see that Naruto's body would move in directions that weren't always consistent with where his legs wound up taking him, but it always seemed so smooth. Sure of himself. Kenichi was envious honestly. It didn't used to be so effective. Akasame said, dredging up older memories of his time there. When he was younger there were certain moves he couldn't make without looking at the ground first, and Mio used that to track his movements and defeat him. It took him quite a while to keep from overwhelming himself. But Naruto's eyes were up and ahead now, and he was feeling sassy and, on the run. Come on, hit me. You know you can. Don't make me move first. In return she just stuck her tongue out at him. With that, Naruto moved forward again and picked the other front corner of vulnerability to attack Mio from. But he wasn't going to try and take her backside no matter what. Not a chance. Naruto's hand-seal hand finally moved, shifting to a seal where his index and pinky were extended while his thumb pointed forward. He blew into the space open between his middle and ring fingers to send a white dust flying into the air. Metsubushi, eye closer. Kenichi gasped in shock at Naruto actually using some kind of blinding agent in the middle of a fight against Mio. That's not fair. He's blinding her? His protective side wanted to jump up and do something about it, but a stern look from Akasame kept him from doing so. You're going to let him cheat like that? He didn't think that Naruto would be the type to fight in such a manner. He didn't seem like someone that would use a dirty trick like that to defeat an opponent, especially a friend, and especially during a spar. But to his surprise, Mio just looked annoyed that she'd been hit with it, cringing before smiling again when Naruto popped her body with several punches prompting her to get back to defending herself. Naruto-san is a ninja. Akasame pointed out as the two continued to spar. He obtains victory by any means he sees fit to win. What exactly did you think ninjutsu techniques entailed? Tricks and maneuvers of opportunity to secure an advantage. But he would never truly try to blind Mio, during a spar at least. Naruto went for a half sweep, but stopped his leg and stood up with the other one to shove it forward in a kick that Mio countered with a kick of her own. Naruto bent his front arm to block with his forearm and spun around to give a spinning elbow that Mio ducked. Her duck turned into a powerful leg sweep that almost knocked Naruto entirely upside down. But posting himself up on his hands he flipped through and landed back on his feet as Mio lunged directly at him with a confident smile. She figured he'd recover from her sweep, as the balance that Naruto's fighting style granted him made it very hard to ruin his stability and sense of dexterity. Caught you, Naruto-kun. Crap! Now that she was close, Mio sent one-armed barrages of punches his way that Naruto seemed to ghost through due to his deceptive foot motions. But he wasn't as cocky any longer. She knew how to overcome that mind trick and he knew it, so he just had to hope she used the one he was prepared to handle. She punched forward and let Naruto step back only to place her punching hand on the ground so she could lightly bend the lower half of her body forward to deliver a pair of splitting scissor kicks that was meant to crown the top of Naruto's head. Kenichi then promptly wiped his nose from the light bleeding it did upon thinking about her flexibility. Naruto put his one arm up to block with, taking the pounding of the kicks with a grit to his teeth until Mio pulled them back down and underneath her body to kick his legs out. Naruto merely chose to swan dive and safety roll over her instead of risking a feint that she was probably ready for. After missing those kicks, Mio didn't skip a beat and twisted her body beneath her to get into a 4-point stance before rushing at Naruto, who was still mid-roll. He didn't bother turning around once he got up, instead running forward until he reached the wall with Mio still in hot pursuit. Defying gravity, Naruto jumped at the wall and started running horizontally on it until he reached an upper corner and posted himself up in it, smirking down at Mio, who stopped herself from chasing him farther. "Oh, you're so lucky I'm not wearing shoes, or I'd have been running laps around these walls." Neither of them moved from that spot, so Akasame called it off. "That's enough." Mio got up out of her stance and stretched her arms over her head while Naruto stayed in the corner with his 3 points of contact, feet and one hand, holding him up there. "Still with his free hand in the half-ram seal in front of his face, chalk dust?" Mio asked, referring to the powder Naruto blew at her earlier. "It's harmless." "Yeah, right?" Naruto said as he stayed up in the corner, crossing both of his arms smugly over his chest. "It was all I had on me for it other than the chili powder, since that would only blind you for a little while. I went for the one that wouldn't make you claw your eyes out though. You still fight like a jerk," she teased when he dropped down, the both of them walking over to where Kenichi was sitting down. Naruto plopped down cross-legged on the floor while Mio sat on her knees. "I didn't even see you reach for the bag." "PSSHT, I'm not fighting you fair," Naruto said dismissively, "and I'm not getting behind you either. You defend yourself better from behind than you do from the front." He then noticed Kenichi looking at him strangely. "What's the matter? The way you fought." Kenichi groused, deriding Naruto's lack of sporting martial arts pride. "Oh, come on. I didn't even cheat that badly. I did 2 things that might have been cheating. There was no way he was going to battle anyone he took as a threat without doing anything, akin to what he tried twice in that spar to get an advantage. Just because he couldn't do everything didn't mean he couldn't try anything." "The dust?" the boy with the band-aid on his face said suspiciously. "That's a real ninjutsu that takes practice and timing," Naruto said, proud of his hard-earned underhanded skills. "She's fine with it. I'm used to it," Mio said with a sly look, saying that she wasn't fine with it, but things like that had happened so much it didn't really matter anymore. But if a move works then it has merit. And just like that she perked up, pumping a fist in the air. "Now it's your turn. Do you want to spar with me or with Naruto-kun?" She left the choice up to Kenichi, happily waiting on his decision. And Kenichi gulped for 2 separate reasons. He could either fight Mio or he could fight Naruto. So, it was take on a girl that he couldn't touch even if he was of the mind to fight with women, or fight someone else he couldn't beat and risk getting something underhanded done to him in the course of the match. "You should make your choice," Akasame warned Kenichi with a gleam in his eye. "If you don't, I'll make the decision for you, and my decision will be both at once." A few days later, Koryo High School. "Gardening club?" Naruto said to himself as he walked through the halls alone. "No thanks. I've got plants at home to take care of." "Don't need to take care of the schools too." Kenichi was a member of that club, and their little argument from a week ago had more or less become water under the bridge. He couldn't stay pissed at his friend just for having a different point of view than him. One of them liked to look for trouble when it was coming their way, the other liked to go around it if he could. But either way, with the end of school brought time for mandatory club activities again, and Naruto still didn't have one. Kenichi had taken up gardening, which was something peaceful that he liked. Good for him. And a day or 2 Daimonji tried to pick a fight with him in the club by smashing the place up. Bad idea for him, because Kenichi basically took out the trash in one move, decisively this time. So, he was coming along. At least now he could whip Daimonji's ass without any kind of trouble, but as he had always said from the start, Daimonji was trash that didn't really know how to fight. He had always just been bigger than everyone else. Their concerns weren't with the scrubs though. Naruto had pissed off the big boss, so to speak. So it was just a matter of time. In the meantime, he needed a club or he'd start suffering the consequences for it from the school. But they were all so terrible. He'd have played a sport, but there wasn't any sport he liked enough to waste time he could have been using to train. Now, what did he like? Because whatever the school had wasn't it. Gardening club was a resounding no. There weren't many students there. A handful. And even if Kenichi was in that club too, it was a total buzzkill. He needed stimulation. Okay, how about something a bit more useful to him? Maybe cross-country club? The training he had to do in order to just learn ninjutsu was so intense as a child that most of the others only did the bare minimum after it was no longer deemed necessary. It was meant to shock their cardiovascular systems into keeping up with the method of movement that they used. Naruto believed that being traumatized by the long stretches of miles that they had to run at such young ages was what led to Shikamaru being so passive. He on the other hand kept up that exact same crushing program to this day that would make some adult marathon runners look like lazy asses. He'd dominate cross-country club, and he could use it to completely eliminate conditioning from his training regimen altogether by doing extra miles to more accurately fit with the way he'd be training at home. Anyway, that was something, wasn't it? Yeah, and it would help him save more time in his day for other things. More time training, or dare he say it, some downtime. An impossible dream. Alright. Now my grades won't get screwed by report card time. Naruto cheered to himself out loud. His grades really didn't need any help getting lower right now. Problem solver. These weren't really ninja problems, actually they were, since most ninjas his age would be out in the world by now anyway, so yes, he was still a ninja problem solver. Gore, shut up. You made me lose my game, you blowhard jackass. I was in an online match. Naruto passed by an open doorway where a handheld gaming device was thrown at his head. He ducked it, forcing it to fly past him and smash off of the wall. He was not amused. Oh, I'm sorry that you're such a bitch you can't let a guy enjoy a moment. Naruto said, sticking his head into the classroom where he'd just been berated from by some girl. He probably wouldn't have taken it so hard if she hadn't decided to fling electronics at his head. People tended to take offense to that. Maybe you just lost, because you suck. Some rather pretty red-haired girl wearing a beret and jeans with one leg had been the one doing the yelling from where she'd been lazing around on top of one of the room's desks. Instead of sneering at him angrily as he'd expected her to when he looked inside, she was just staring at him owlishly, as if she knew him and didn't expect to see him or something. Naruto just stared right back at her until it started getting to him and he squinted his eyes at her to convey how uncomfortable he was. Do I know you or something? You're looking at me like we're familiar with each other. Goggles, yellow hair, stupid look on his face when curious, loudmouth with a penchant for cursing, and a distinct lack of attempted chivalry. All of that seemed familiar, and the sound of his voice did as well. Oh no, this is just too perfect. After all of that searching, one of them just drops into my lap? Oi, you okay? Hearing his voice again snapped her out of her reverie, giving her the clarity of mind to stand up and walk over to the door. You know, you've been making a lot of ruckus lately. The girl said with a smirk on her face that didn't promise anything good. That manifested itself in the form of a kick as quick as a skilled fighter's jab shooting out at his head. An unprepared Naruto felt his nose be brushed by the attack as he jumped out into the hallway. As the girl stood in the hallway, 5 other punks stepped out from behind her, all smirking at Naruto and trying to intimidate him with cracking their knuckles and shadow boxing. More Ragnarok? Naruto asked rhetorically, can I get a name to the ass I'm about to kick? Oh, you're definitely him. The girl said, grinning while tilting her beret over her eyes, and I guess I can introduce myself so you'll have a name in mind when you wake up in intensive care. Nanju Kazara. Valkyrie, the 8th fist of Ragnarok. So would that make you the strongest or the weakest? It makes me the newest. The second she yelled at him, Naruto immediately started in on her bodyguards without warning or mercy. He didn't have to stand there and listen to her, and while the others where he managed to take down 3 in rapid succession before the others caught up to the situation and attacked. By that time Kazara had already made her move on him, jumping swiftly through the air mercilessly. At the time, Naruto had managed to take down his latest target by the back and finish him by slamming his forehead into the floor. But quickly got off of his down foe's back due to Kazara's speedy attack aimed at him. Instead of pulling back off of it and opening herself up for a counter from an opportunistic Naruto, she went through with a driving kick that stuck into her subordinate's stomach. Using that as leverage to do more, she launched herself at Naruto faster than her first jump, much to his surprise, for multiple reasons, and lashed out with a quick kick that hit him in the face and knocked him into the wall. Naruto spun with the direction of the kick to take away some of its power since he couldn't prevent it from hitting. He grits his teeth from the kick and spit blood out on the ground. Even with the blood, he wasn't that hurt compared to the guy that Kazara had literally stepped on to get to him. The poor guy had been out cold when Naruto had gotten through with him, but the shock and pain from Kazara's kick woke him back up. He shouted out and turned over before vomiting heavily on the floor, nearly crying from the pain of having her nearly crush his stomach. What the hell was that supposed to be? Naruto shouted, blood still trailing from his lip a bit, that was your own man. You nearly killed the guy. Just to kick me once. He was a ninja, but he'd never use someone that was supposed to be on his side just to land one blow. He had so few people that he could rely on or trust in the slightest. How could he do something like that and look them in the eye again? But it worked. Kazara said, hands on her hips uncaringly as she glanced back at the injured gang member she'd put in that state. The only use he had after you ran through him in a second was to help me get to you. Weaklings don't get to pick and choose what happens to them. With a snap of her fingers, she got the attention of all of the others remaining. Go get as many of us as you can find. We've got this bastard now, and he isn't running. You should have made him stay. Naruto said with a growl in his voice as the Ragnarok cannon fodder left to go get more. Now you don't have any more meat shields to sacrifice, and you've got to take me on all by yourself. It was tough talk, but that kick was on a completely different level from Koga's. His kicks, though stronger than a normal person's, were sloppy and straightforward. These were faster, and she'd hit him right in the cheek from a move she'd altered on the spot. She'd called an audible on an attack and still rattled his skull. These were the kicks of a specialist. Kazara seriously wanted to smash his face on the bottom of her footwear, but talent was talent, and toughness was toughness. He took a jumping kick from her that he hadn't even been prepared to take and remained standing the entire time. Do you want to join Ragnarok? Kazara offered with a smirk and a sweeping gesture of her hand to reveal black gloves with an 8 across the backs of them. We've got control of the city, and there are supposed to be big plans in the works for us. You can't win this war, so why not hitch up on the winning side and help us get ready for the real battle? So, you can step on me the second you see the chance? Naruto sneered, eyes flickering to the Ragnarok member crawling away from the scene, still holding his stomach and covered in his own bile. No thanks. I'll stick with people that are my real friends. That bitch had just kicked him in the face with steel-toed boots. Why would he join her? The sound of multiple footsteps came from the direction behind Kazara in the hall, and in short order she was joined by a slew of even more underlings than she'd started with. Well, about those friends, where would you say they are now? She said as they started forming a wall of sorts in front of her to begin moving on Naruto, because for people that you're willing to get your ass kicked for, they sure as hell aren't here. You won't last a minute. At the end of the hallway behind Naruto, Najima was hiding behind the corner watching the entire thing. No, why the hell isn't he running? That's got to be 10 guys. That ninja couldn't get himself destroyed here. A ninja, a real-life ninja, could be the greatest boon to his world domination plans to date. There had to be something he could do. Wait. Kenichi was trained, or was training. And he was still in the school in his after-school club. Those two were supposed to be best friends, so that could work. And that mule girl was in the gymnastics club to boot. She'd definitely show up. Hold on, you stupid ninja. Najima thought to himself as he ran off at breakneck speed to find one or the other. There's strength in numbers. Strength in numbers. You think just because you've got a bunch of mooks to put between you and me that this is gonna be enough? Naruto said out loud meanwhile at his current predicament while he wiped the blood from his lip. Let me tell you, you get one of those. I dare you to kick me like that again. What are you going to do, ninja boy? Kazara taunted as her men blocked off as much of the hall between Naruto and her as they could while moving forward. Dressing in black pajamas and running around making weird sign language symbols isn't really going to win you any fights. They ran forward to begin pounding away on him, but Naruto didn't turn and run the way they expected him to with the open hall at his back. Yeah, because running your mouth and hiding behind the expendables here is really gonna win this for you, Naruto said, drawing a quick fistful of shuriken that prepared to throw before realizing that even if he didn't get in as much trouble for fighting, if he pulled out sharp metal weapons in school he was going to get kicked out. Thus, he stuck them back into his bag. Not here. Instead of trying it as they were now closer than before, Naruto simply ran right forward into the mass of humanity before him and ducked through the first few before they tried to punch at him. They could swear they had him dead to rights, but someone would inexplicably wind up in the path of their punch, so they wound up hitting their own guys and missing Naruto entirely. Apparently, trying to hit one person in close even though they had the numbers edge was very difficult when he knew what he was doing, because he made it through entirely untouched. Don't underestimate ninjutsu. Kazara saw all of this, as instead of bolting straight through he intentionally stopped and started to spook her men. Thus she was fully prepared when she was him bypass all of her gang members to go right at her. Chikifker is fast. She didn't have time to be surprised. She merely smirked at the show of skill and jumped at him when she did the same to her. Well, dodge this. Naruto saw that she was anticipating him coming in the entire way and went wide-eyed before altering his jump into a slide along the slick tiles of the floor. Kazara went flying overhead with a kick that would have been aimed right at his skull, and he wasn't about to get into a jump-kicking duel with a taekwondo practitioner from what he knew about them. With a screech of shoes on the floor, Naruto stopped himself and prepared to go back after her when the same Ragnarok members he'd gotten past the first time charged him again. Naruto appeared to jump back, and all of them went after him to chase him down. With his second step back, Naruto jumped to the side to push off of the wall and lash out with a kick to the face that hit 3 people before the last one got close enough to punch him. Naruto's used his left hand as a starting point to spin around the punch and his opponent's entire body, as if he was gliding across the floor until he reached the back of the fighter's head and prepared to finish him until he saw Kazara throwing another series of rapid-fire kicks with one leg from his peripheral vision. He lifted an arm to block and did so, but the force of her kick made him spin. Goddammit. I can't focus on her. 2 more heavy kicks followed and Naruto felt like someone had swung a baseball bat at his guard. Ugh. His back against a wall, Naruto looked at his left arm and felt the constant stinging that just wouldn't go away. The same idiot that had just been saved by Kazara tried to attack Naruto again, but he should have left well enough alone when Naruto stopped his punch with the bottom of his shoe. The thug recoiled as if he'd just punched a row of thumbtacks and drew his hand back. He then tasted the bottom of that very same shoe when Naruto high-kicked him in the face. The landed blow knocked the young man in a short arc through the air onto his upper back and Kazara attacked again with a kick aimed at his head. Instinctually he ducked it and a grin spread across her face as she pivoted her leg in midair and shifted to an axe kick. Axe kick. She had him. Or did she? Instead of hitting Naruto, she inexplicably wound up bringing her leg down on the shoulder of one of her own men that had been trying to come up from behind. Was that loser even that close to the fight to begin with? Whatever, if he was dumb enough to be that close, he deserved his collarbone to be shattered. They all getting in her way and weren't bothering him much at all. Wait, where did he go? She was seriously regretting having that many people with her when Naruto took advantage of her most recent bit of fratricide to flip over her head and grab her by the shoulders with his arms crossed before kneeling upon landing and bending forward, unbalancing her and hurling her over his head with his momentum. Uncrossing his arms as he did so sent her spinning and rolling through the air into an oncoming slew of 4 new reinforcements. Nichibatsu Kuka, Twilight Drop. If those losers hadn't been there, she would have smacked her head off of the floor like a cantaloupe. He threw her so hard. The flipping about wouldn't have helped her landing either. With the cushion of people to prevent her from being potentially catastrophically flipped through the air, Kazara got right back up and shook off the disorientation. Get off! She groused, shoving people away that had been toppled over with her own body. You're all useless. You can't even slow him down enough for me to take a shot at him? What good are you? Prompted by their tomboyish, yet still rather cute leader-in-arms, they got back up and charged Naruto again. Apparently, it didn't matter if they took their time or not. If they went slow, he'd blow right through them. If they went fast, he'd make them look stupid, so they just threw caution to the wind and went for it. FCK this shit. Naruto said, getting back into his stance, I don't care anymore. Hide behind all of the idiots you want. I've got something for that. Reaching into his bag, he had one weapon on him that he knew he could use without getting in trouble. Kazara covered her eyes as a plume of smoke burst up from where her allies had attacked their enemy from. What the hell? 2 smacks were heard from within the smoke, as well as a lot of jostling and fighting. It sounded like they'd managed to grab that bastard. Some ninja, getting stuck in his own stupid smokescreen. A whistle alerted her to a place farther down the hall and she quickly ran forward before jumping over and through the smoke, landing on the other side to see Naruto standing on the lockers by an open window. Those windows opened? Wait. That meant that her men were kicking their own asses. And as the smoke started to disperse through the window Naruto had opened, she saw that this was exactly the case and she facepalmed hard enough to almost knock her hat off. You damn idiots. I know you're actually stronger than this. Naruto lifted his left arm to show a deep purple bruise that had come from blocking one kick he actually had to guard against instead of dodge. A girl like you. You're really as tough as people say you are. But if you really want to break my neck like you said you did, next time leave the goon squad at home. You don't even need them. You just made me waste 3 minutes of my life beating up 20 guys. Her eyes widened, as even though it was backhanded as all hell, it was still something of a compliment. But even so, he was still walking away. Wait, you fucking coward. Kazara cursed at Naruto before turning to her thugs as they had realized that they'd been fighting each other by this point. Go get him and bring him back, she ordered, and the others went after him, but Naruto wound up slipping out of the window to get outside. Gah, I hate that son of a bitch. Go find him. And will someone get Takeda already? She already busted up his arm. The next time she was going to kick his skull in. And where the FCK did Shiratori go? Naruto what? Kenichi shouted with a drop of the watering pail he'd been using to nourish the plants in the clubroom. He found Valkyrie? With an apron to keep dirt from getting on his white uniform shirt and gardening gloves on his hands, he didn't exactly strike the most imposing figure. More like they ran into each other, but basically, yes. Naijima informed him. Why didn't you do something? Like what? I am doing something. Getting a fighter that'll actually help. At that, Kenichi gulped and made to make his move, taking off his gardening gear and handing them over to a fellow club member with dark hair and twin braided pigtails and glasses that had come over to see what was wrong with Kenichi. Izumi-san, I've got to go. A friend of mine is in trouble. You met him earlier, Uzumaki Naruto-san. The girl blushed and nodded, knowing that he was a fighter. Izumi Yuka had seen him defeat the brute Daimonji that had tried to ruin the greenhouse earlier that week, and knew that he wasn't the budding delinquent that rumors sprouting up would have him believe. He was a good-hearted person that was able to actually stand up for himself. While she didn't like fighting at all, that was an attractive trait to her. Still, she didn't know much about that boy Naruto other than the fact he seemed to be on great terms with Kenichi. But they were like oil and water for the most part. Are you certain? Isn't that dangerous? It shouldn't have mattered if it was dangerous or not. And though he could hear the concern in her voice, Kenichi just gave the girl a smile that turned her face red. Well, that's what friends do. He'd do it for me. The enamored look on her face went lost when Kenichi thought of something and turned back to Naijima. Wait. Haruo, why do you even care about this at all? You're pure evil. It's all for my empire, of course. Naijima stated firmly, I can see value in being owed one by a man such as that, and by you as well, since I'm the one telling you that there's danger afoot. Kenichi just gave him a deadpan stare and wondered if there was anything that guy did that solely for the benefit of another person. Now go before it's too late. You're not coming? You're the one training. I'm brains, not muscle. Touché. Before he could leave though, the greenhouse found itself populated by one more that shouldn't have been there. I knew that following away a scampering rat would lead me back to a nest. A nigh expressionless, tall, older person, extremely effeminate with long, wavy blonde hair walked in wearing fine clothing, a white button-up shirt, dark pants, and a blue coat that reached their ankles. And here this one led me right to Shirahama Kenichi. Was this person even in high school? Ah. Naijima backed away and wound up hiding behind the girl from earlier who was not a fan of that at all, the top bodyguard for Nanju Kazara. That's Shiratori, the White Shadow. Damn it, he didn't know there'd been anyone there in the hallway that had seen him run away from the trouble that Naruto had found himself in, and he definitely didn't think there would be someone that would go after him instead of staying to deal with the clear and present threat that had been Uzumaki Naruto. How negligent to allow himself to be tailed. But Kenichi couldn't beat this person. Kenichi blinked, noticing just how girly looking this guy was, and slowly slid himself into the basic posture for his karate. So he'd have to fight another member of Ragnarok, one that was supposedly good if Naijima's cowering was anything to go by. What do you all want with me? If you're not a part of Ragnarok. Shiratori said in a quiet and hard-to-hear voice, calmly moving into position for a battle, you're not allowed to stand. Kazara-sama explicitly said to crush you and everyone else around you that plan on going against us. We didn't plan on anything. It just happened. Was it so wrong to desire to not get your ass kicked on a near-daily basis? Did that really call for an entire gang to come after your head? It didn't make sense. Where's Naruto-san? Probably being dragged off in a bloody mess by now after what Kazara-sama has gotten through doing to him. Yuka let out a shocked gasp at the casual admission of such brutality. She probably knocked all of his teeth out for speaking to her the way he has been the last 2 times they've had words. But I wouldn't worry about him. Without warning, Shiratori attacked Kenichi head-on. You should be more concerned with yourself. The first thing Kenichi saw was a leg rising at his head, a kick-based fighter. What did he learn about dealing with certain types of fighters from his masters after hearing about Naruto beat up Koga the kicker? Too slow. Too late, as Kenichi was forced to block his body once Shiratori's leg battered his side and sent him stumbling into a counter that held up a row of the plants in the room with a bang. You move like a beginner. Without speed you'll never come close to scratching a taekwondo fighter. Amid the scream from Yuka and Nijima's nervous chattering, Kenichi winced and held his side at the blow he had received. I blocked and that still hurt like hell. This guy's kicks are strong. If you can't avoid my kicks, Kazara-sama would eat you alive. Shiratori said, standing in a sideways taekwondo stance. Her moves are the perfect blend of speed, dexterity, and power. Above even mine. My friend fought a taekwondo user a while ago and he made it sound easy. Kenichi said, getting back into his stance. You only use your legs. TCH. Shiratori moved toward Kenichi again and began throwing more kicks from multiple angles. Koga is just a punk that learned enough taekwondo to get ahead of others like himself. He doesn't train, and he doesn't come close to measuring up to real martial artists. I don't see how you can think you're much better than him. Kenichi said, finding that all he could do was dodge. Those kicks were heavy. And he knew something about heavy kicks. Training with a fighting monster like Apachai trying to teach him. All of Ragnarok is just a gang. What would make your reason for fighting any better than his if this is what you're doing with it? Because I wish to be like Kazara-sama. Shiratori said, launching a short volley of kicks that Kenichi painstakingly blocked before leaning out of the way of a pair of punches that came back in response. Not there to play around, Shiratori leaned out of the way of a punch aimed at the face only to lift a leg and block a punch aimed at the body with the knee. Incredible the way that she is. I won't allow anything to halt her progress to the top, and I joined Ragnarok to ensure that trash like you never believes themselves to be on her level. Kenichi was stunned. Shiratori hadn't even tried to block him high and had seen his second more subtle attack all the way through. Karate wasn't working? He then felt his jaw move several inches to the right when Shiratori moved the blocking leg to kick him across the face and knock him to the floor. Gah, the Yamazaki technique didn't fool this guy for a second. Kenichi! Yuka cried out as she ran to his side. Stop! Why are you doing this? Like I said. Shiratori said with a flip of the hair. Weaklings shouldn't try to stand tall as if they're worthy. People like Kazara-sama are where they are for a reason. The 8 fists of Ragnarok are where they are because they made themselves better than you. Don't try to pretend that you measure up. Nijima at this point had taken to hiding in the supply closet. Oh man. Stupid Kenichi doesn't have a single advantage here. Speed, power, experience, and especially talent, Shiratori has it all over him. Kenichi slowly got up and moved Yuka aside in case Shiratori would actually attack him with a non-combatant in the way. His face was clearly marked up from the kick that had landed, but he put his hands back up regardless. Scoffing at him, Shiratori merely got up into the same stance as before, not sweating the determined look on Kenichi's face. Some people don't learn until you force it into their heads. If you can't touch me, how would you ever hope to face Kazara-sama? He probably wouldn't fight her anyway since it was obviously apparent that Kazara or Valkyrie was a woman, but that wasn't the point to be had. The point was that he was being told that because he had always been weak, he had no right trying to become strong. Why? So, gangs like Ragnarok could do whatever they wanted and mess with people all they wanted, but the second someone else came around to stop that from happening then it became some big crime? Some inexcusable slight against them? No. If you were weak and you worked as hard as you could to change that, you deserved to keep your head up. And even if you weren't strong, what did that matter? I might not be born into martial arts like my friends. I might not have been training for as long as this Kazara person. Kenichi said, narrowing his eyes at Shiratori, but that doesn't mean I have to just lay down and let people walk all over me when they feel like it. People like you. Kenichi got back up in his preferred karate stance, not deterred in the least by the beating. Shiratori raised an eyebrow in interest and went on the guard at this new situation presented in the battle. People like you are the reason I wanted to learn how to fight in the first place. To keep you from mistreating others just because you can. Kenichi barked, gritting his teeth and not willing to back down now. Being strong isn't a privilege, it's a responsibility. Yuka looked at him as if he were some kind of hero, even though he didn't really look it at the moment, bleeding from the cheek and black-eyed as he was. But for all of that talk, Shiratori was still faster and had the Rengear attack with the kicks, which was then demonstrated when he approached again. He was able to dodge 3 kicks from Shiratori that kept him from getting closer, but even after getting through the edge of the range of the kicks, Shiratori wasn't in range of anything he could attack with. giving Shiratori time to chamber another kick and snap one straight up to hit him right under the chin, sending Kenichi stumbling back again until he was able to catch a hand on top of one of the counters that held the plants of the club. His hand skimmed across the top until he was able to stop himself, and a couple of planters fell to the floor, breaking and sending potted dirt all over. Pathetic, Shiratori said, slowly walking Kenichi's way. Kenichi. Looking to the closet where Najima was hiding, he saw the strange alien making a boxed-in gesture with his hands before using two figures to mimic Shiratori kicking. He kept repeating the two hand gestures until Kenichi's eyes widened and he understood. That was perfect. He'd been fighting in the open area at the front of the room by the door, because that was where the fight started and that was where he had the most room to move around. While that was true, the same went for Shiratori, who needed it more and could use it better with the kicks that had been battering Kenichi around since the outset. The clubroom consisted of rows of 12-foot counters with around 2 feet of space between them. It was a rather tight fit, and that was perfect. Shiratori walked right in, throwing forward kicks while Kenichi backed up, keeping his guard up to prevent himself from taking too much damage. Finally going for a trick attack, Shiratori tried to swing a leg out to gain momentum but ended up banging the leg against the side of the counter. Kenichi took a page from Naruto's book and got opportunistic as he switched his stance to that of basic Muay Thai. Swinging his elbow, he actually managed to hit Shiratori, who was not used to having to block with arms. And not being used to blocking with arms meant that Shiratori also wasn't used to having to do things to reset after blocking with the arms, thus the default was to push forward and try to shove the enemy back. Chance. Kenichi utilized a very simple defensive tactic when an opponent came forward like that. He grabbed the back of the head and neck of Kazara's most trusted bodyguard and pulled down while jumping up and forward to smash Shiratori in the face with his knee. Kaloi, flying knee. Lights out. Najima could only watch with an expression of shock. Kenichi had not only legitimately won a fight, with his tactically brilliant assistance of course, but he'd done it in one blow after looking like a human kickpad for the majority of it. Not the prettiest win, but you could either win ugly or not win at all. Kenichi stood over Shiratori's body for a moment before realizing that it was all over. Sorry, he said, sighing in relief, but that's the one move that Apachai-sensei worked my legs to the bone making sure I knew. Basic or not, it still worked. Kenichi, old buddy. Najima exclaimed as he darted out from the closet and started patting the young man on the back jubilantly. Do you see what teamwork can do? You, the muscle. Me, the brains and ambition. Uzumaki, the operational know-how. Straight to the top. I didn't believe in you, but I just saw it for myself. We can knock Ragnarok from the top. Whoa, Haruo. Kenichi started moving away, holding up his hands defensively. This Shiratori guy just said that Valkyrie is way stronger than him. I don't think taking on Ragnarok is the best idea by myself. At all. He just wanted to be able to handle them when they attacked him. He wasn't going to go looking for trouble. Right. Najima said, antennae sticking up out of his hair, tongue looking strangely forked as he was in thought. Not by yourself. Of course not, keek. When he realized Kenichi had moved away from him, he then started speaking thoughtfully. Shiratori was supposed to be one of the top guns of Valkyrie's gang though. She's a taekwondo user like her leader, so if nothing else you got some serious experience by beating her here. He. What? Kenichi elaborated on what he said. Shiratori was a he, right? A really girly-looking he. His face turned a bit desperately when he saw the stone face that Najima was giving him, right? Haruo? Izumi-san? Holding up his PDA, Najima showed Kenichi the file he had on Kazara's gang and those in it, with the page on Shiratori. No. Shiratori is a girl. A flat-chested girl, but still a girl. Admittedly it's hard to tell under the coat and with those clothes though. He then noticed Kenichi start shaking. What's wrong with you? Confused a bit too, Kenichi's fellow club member Yuka went over to check quickly while Shiratori was still out and nodded in confirmation from behind her glasses. Najima-san is right, Kenichi-kun. She's a girl. No, didn't I come here for a reason? Najima thought to himself as Kenichi started running around the greenhouse fretting about how he'd gone against his own moral ethics by knocking out a girl. I swear I'm forgetting something. With Naruto, outside of Koryo High School, from the 4th floor where Naruto had been fighting Kazara, he lowered himself to the ground by a grappling rope he kept in his bag before pulling it down and packing it back up. As he walked around on the ground around the school, he held his left forearm that was swollen with a dark purple or black bruise on the outside of his forearm that had almost spread around it entirely. It hurt like hell. This is why I try not to block. Naruto thought to himself, as every time his heart beat a pump his arm would throb right in that spot. Ugh, I think she cracked my forearm with those boots. I don't have any bandages in that damn bag? Of course, when he knew he was going to school he had to allot a lot of space for books, and things that he could easily hide or get away with having in school in case anyone ever managed to check his bag. God knew he kept enough crap in there on a regular basis that he could spare some space for some first aid. So, his arm was probably injured, but now he at least knew something about one of their top foes firsthand, that she kicked like someone was swinging a sledgehammer. Stupid riffraff. Though he was able to grab plenty of them for well-timed kawarimi no jutsu, body replacement technique, attempts early on, they wound up being a pain in the ass when he actually started fighting Kazara herself. He couldn't focus on too many people aside from her in battle when he was taking her on. She was too quick to give those kinds of openings to. With a grunt, Naruto sat against the trunk of a tree outside and slumped to the ground, glaring at his left arm. Well, he said to himself before his phone went off. He'd given his number to another person now, so more calls during the day had to be expected. Hello? Naruto-kun. Are you alright? Where are you? Mo. So, her gymnastics club was over? Good, because he wanted to go home. Joining cross-country club or whatever the hell could wait because his arm was killing him. Haruo-san said that you were getting attacked by Ragnarok's Valkyrie. I was. She had a lot of friends. Naruto said, wincing as he moved his wrist and fingers of his free hand. Didn't go as well as I'd hoped it would because I didn't finish it. But, it didn't go that bad either. Kenichi beat one of Valkyrie's lieutenants in his clubroom. No foolin'? That's awesome. Naruto said, perking up before wincing at his recent injury. Can we talk later though? I kind of have to go home now. Are you sure you're alright? Kenichi said he and Haruo-san can't find you. She was worried about him? He couldn't believe he used to think that she was an enemy whose only reason for existing in this world was to stop him from getting those weapons. She was the sweetest thing to be concerned with him. But then again she was worried about everyone. She was very empathetic. There's word going around that there are a bunch of Ragnarok searching high and low for you. We're at the front gate and about to go to Ryuzanpaku. If you need, we can wait for you and all go together. Naruto stood up, unable to help the grin that spread across his face. Having people that cared about his well-being was definitely better than going it alone. If he had to fight every single one of the 8 fists of Ragnarok for them, he would, just get started on the way home. I'll be fine on my own. He said as he jumped on a tree branch and then on the wall that surrounded the school property. I can move just fine on my own. I'm gonna go to my place and train, but, he continued speaking as he jumped off of the wall to leave school, with no one really around to follow him or even do anything about him making such a movement, but a pair of easygoing eyes watched his moves as he did so before he lost track of him altogether. Takeda and Yukita walked out from one of the side doors of the school, the latter with a comfortable smile on his face. What an interesting guy. He's the one that stood against Kazara-sama's kicks and crushed Koga? He said to himself as he walked over to Naruto's tree with his left hand shoved into his pocket while he tried to use his other hand to judge the distance that the ninja had jumped up to in order to reach the first branch. Some jump. The guy should really join track and field. Maybe our school wouldn't suck at it if he did? Yukita just sneered at the thought of someone causing their gang that much trouble at school. Stop complimenting the guy, would you? First Kobe gets destroyed, Shiratori gets beaten by that Shirahama kid. Even Kazara-sama couldn't take that ninja bastard's head. Just what's going on around here? I was just making an observation. You and I can't make that jump. Takeda said with his infuriatingly calm smile. I don't think you could make it to that branch if you reached for it with your hands. I'm Yukita the thrower, not Yukita the jumper, you jackass. Yeah. Takeda waved off his hotter-headed ally's response before grinning to himself as he began walking away to leave school as well. I wonder what's faster though, a ninja's steps or a boxer's jab. That evening, Naruto's house. All the way home, Naruto had been nursing that arm of his as every move it made felt like something in it was clicking down where he'd taken Kazara's power kicks. The difference in a taekwondo user's kick from his own was considerable. A small girl like that had so much strength in her legs. Even without the steel-toed boots, the impact from her blows would have been sick. He was actually a bit excited. This was different from the grim kind of fear he had in his heart before Ryuzanpaku missions. He couldn't help but compare the damnable feeling to the kind of feeling that ancient warriors would get before being asked to charge an enemy stronghold uphill in an open field. But it was a bit of a rush. He didn't want to become an adrenaline junkie or anything, but it was just something to point out. Even with his left arm's ability downed, he could still use it. And each breath of fresh air he took on his way home made him feel hyper-aware. The blood pounding in his ears made him feel like he could hear a cat jostle a trash can from 3 blocks away. He felt like he could run a marathon and still have the juice to go a few rounds with Mio in a spar. But he'd have to put that aside from now and fix his arm, and once he got through the front door of his home, he locked the door behind him and immediately went looking around for his medical supplies. The one he had upstairs was basically empty of what he needed, so he had to go downstairs to the cellar to get to the extras he'd stockpiled over the years. He just decided to get a snack to chew on and get busy. While the 2 upstairs levels of Naruto's home looked extremely normal for a modern-day middle-class house, once you got past the trick-lock door and descended the stairs it stopped being so common. When in the hell did his dad find the time to set up a ninja dojo environment? It was larger in overall space than the entire first floor, front yard, and backyard with 3 different rooms in it. It was awesome, and Naruto couldn't stop smiling out of pride when he'd first found it years ago. It looked like a classical building interior, from the walls and sliding doors to the wooden floors out in the hallway around the main dojo room. But the floors themselves were a training tool, set to make even the steps of a cat sound out when they were walked on, in order to make moving silently and light-footedly a practice as absently thought of as blinking. And why was there a mouse standing on 2 legs, looking at him with closed eyes, with a pink ribbon on its tail? It didn't even run away when Naruto walked toward it and stooped in front of it to stare at it before he broke off a little piece of his granola bar to hand down to the diminutive animal. "You're somebody's pet, aren't you?" he said as the mouse spiritedly took the treat and nibbled at it after scampering up Naruto's shoulder. It was obvious at that point, but it still had to be said. Why else would it be that comfortable with him, even if it knew he wouldn't hurt it? And why the hell else would it have a bow on its tail? Nothing else did though. And Naruto wished he hadn't dropped his backpack with his weapons that he didn't keep down in the basement at the front door with his shoes. Digging through his pockets, Naruto looked for anything he might be able to use as a weapon, and eventually settled for taking off his belt to wrap around his injured left arm and fist. Slowly moving through the halls to the back room of the basement where the particular weapons and equipment his parents had amassed before their untimely demises had been kept, Naruto slowly slid the door open to find a woman in a small pink kimono and purple stockings sitting on the floor holding one of his parents', and by proxy his, weapons. In her hands she was carefully observing a 3-foot steel chain with a small metal weight at both ends of it, just looking it over until her eyes panned up to lock with his. He looked ready to fight. Jittery, but very, very ready to fight. He really believed that he could somehow win. That he could somehow get in some kind of lucky move, even though he'd never come anywhere near getting close to doing it before, even though she was armed, and even though all he had was a belt wrapped around his. Well, it wasn't like there was anywhere else to run, or if he even thought that he could escape either way, so that was probably a big factor as to why "you're here, in my house," Naruto said, knowing that the cordiality with Ryuzanpaku was going to get him killed somehow. "How did you even find me here?" Shigure looked back down at the weapon in her hand and continued to appraise it, even as she spoke. "You attend Mio's and Kenichi's school. I followed you one day this week, to this place. Was it really that easy?" "Not really. You take confusing routes home." "But I was on the rooftops." Curses. Of course, he didn't check the rooftops. Nobody moved like that other than very few people, and his current enemies weren't amongst that particular group. He kept his eyes to the streets where Ragnarok members were more likely to be trolling around. "All right then," Naruto said, still standing in a stance ready to defend himself. "I always figured this would happen the second you figured out where I live." The locks on his door wouldn't have stopped him from breaking in, so he figured someone else could have too. "So come on, let's get this over with." "I didn't come to fight," Shigure said, standing up from the floor and walking over to Naruto. "Do you know how to use this?" she asked him, holding up the chain. "And wait, this weapon? You've never used it when you've been caught by us." He never used any of those things when he fought with them. He stuck to shuriken and other supplementary tools. "My man Riki Gusari? I do weapons work every morning before school, and I train with these every once in a while," Naruto said, crossing his arms over his chest. "I know how to use everything in this room just fine. I just can't carry any old thing I want with me. My bag is usually heavy enough without throwing more than I need in there. Which was bullshit, and the almost awkward way he said it showed as much. He armed himself to the teeth every single time he'd gone in there. It was just mostly with stuff that would help him hide and break into things instead of fighting, though, since he wouldn't have had a chance anyway. The mouse on his shoulder jumped off and ran over onto Shigur's instead, shaking its head at him. Traitor. It could probably tell that he was full of crap, though. Sure, he knew how to use everything in there, but it didn't mean he was good at all of it. Ryuzanpaku's resident master of all things weapon-related just stared at Naruto long enough to unnerve him. I see. She then handed him the chain and walked back away from him a few steps. Show me. Like now? Why? Holding the chain in both hands at opposite ends, Naruto stood at the ready, keeping the chain outstretched in front of himself as if he were about to be attacked. He still stood wary, as if she drew that nodachi from her back it wouldn't matter what he had, she'd blow right through him. He took a step forward to make a move to try and show her when Shigur spoke up. Stop. She said before he could even try an attack. Wad dash. Naruto said, staring at her with squinted eyes, I didn't even do anything yet. Shigur could see that he had absolutely no faith in what he'd been holding and stopped him from making a move with a weapon that he clearly didn't want to use. You need a longer chain to fight a weapon user with any kind of confidence. That length is good for hand-to-hand. She took the weapon from him and handed him another one about as long as his body. This is more for you. He looked at it, trying to adjust to the lengthened weapon and why she was even doing this. Now try. You said you could use everything in here. Use this. Nodding to himself and to Shigur, Naruto held the chain at weighted end with his left hand while placing his right hand further up the chain, leaving 1.5 feet of slack at the end where he began spinning it over his head counterclockwise. Dead silence filled the room with the exception of the swinging weapon whipping through the air, and Naruto wondered if he was doing something wrong again since she wasn't saying anything. Shigur simply stared at him impassively, and he couldn't tell what she was looking at or for. Attack! He didn't know why he chose to listen, but Naruto suddenly threw the weighted end that he'd been spinning at her underhand, swiftly aiming at her body before she moved around it and went right for him. Naruto pulled the weight back as quickly as he could and spun around in a circle while it was retracting, turning it into a swinging weapon that Shigur jumped over before it could hit her. Her feet pressed off of the ceiling and she launched down at Naruto, tackling him to the floor. The disoriented young ninja found the chain inexplicably wrapped around his neck and in Shigur's hand, threatening to choke him out. She just stared down at him as he tried to wonder why that had happened so fast, and what the hell this had been about to begin with. God, she was light, and he had a primo view of her mesh shirt-clad sizable bust underneath her kimono. And did steel have a scent? As quickly as that, Shigur seemed to find what she'd been there to see and had removed herself from him and began walking out of the armory room, leaving Naruto on the floor with the Manriki Gasari chain still around his neck. The next time you come to Ryuzanpaku, you need to have a conversation with the masters. I'm here because of Sakaki and Kensei. The elder agreed. So, I came here. Wait. Agreed to what? Naruto said, getting the chain from the weapon off of his neck before getting up to follow her all the way out of his parents' basement training facility and out of his house entirely. As she didn't stop again. What just happened? And why do I need to have a conversation with anyone? I don't want to. She wouldn't hear it though, and get your arm checked by Akasame. I know it's broken. Seriously, what the hell just went on inside of his house? And how'd she know his arm was broken? He covered the bruise with his belt, didn't wince when using his weapons, and used the damn weapons the way he was supposed to. Those Ryuzanpaku masters were some scary people. I won't do what you say just because you tell me to out of the blue. Naruto said once Shigur went out his front door, presumably to start on her way back to the dojo. You're just the lady that kicks my ass every once in a while, you don't have any power over me. She had barely made it out of Naruto's yard before those words got her to stop and slowly turn around. When she did, both she and her mouse were looking at him with an intimidating stare that actually made him want to jump underneath his bed and hide like he was 5 years old again. If you don't do those things, I'll come back and make you. Make him? Okay, fear for life or not, he wasn't going to take that. He resented it for several reasons that he had been about to voice aloud. The first instinct he had was to open his mouth and bark out that she couldn't make him do a damn thing. But he thought wiser of it when he saw a slight flash of silver from the top of her nodachi sheath and quickly went back inside, shutting his door behind him as if that would stop her for even half a second if she'd really decided to come and get him. Right. Naruto said to himself as he swore. He could still feel her glaring at his back through the wall and the door from outside. You showed her Naruto? Scary sword lady, or not? Shikamaru always said that Ryu Zanpaku was going to be the death of him one of these days. He was starting to think that maybe being positive and upbeat wouldn't make Shikamaru's prediction any less accurate for the near future. That's it for this reading. Hit like and subscribe for a free ticket pass going to the different worlds of anime fanfiction. Looking forward to having you on board again.